welcome to my stream. Sorry I'm a little late. I was having some problems with my camera for my to record my picture. So today I'm doing a picture of a Philippine eagle, which is a lovely fierce looking fellow. I haven't done too much research on this one this time, so I'll have to look it up and find out. If you'd like to check it out and chat and pass on some information about the Philippine eagle, I would be very happy to see it. Today, I was actually in two minds about what sort of watercolors to use. And if you've seen my streams previously, you'll see that my preferred watercolor of choice is my favorite, Dr. P.H. Martin's liquid hydrous watercolors. And I show these every week, and I will show them for those that come in late and would just like to know what I use. So these ones are a liquid watercolor, and you can't really see it, it's sort of a bit out of focus, but they're they're light fast, they're very richly pigmented. They mix very well with water. They go very, very dilute. You only need a tiny little bit to spread a long way. And with 1 or 2 drops, you can go really far and you can do lots of pictures. So they're very good value for money. It says on here that they are actually, a concentrate, archival, transparent, as you'd expect watercolors to be, because watercolors should be transparent. If they're not, then they're not exactly watercolors like this, they're gouache. So today I'm thinking of either was using these, which is what I do nearly every time, or using these lovely gouache paints that I have called Kuretake Ganzai Tambi, and they come in a lovely range of colors. So as you can see from here, really nice colors. They're sort of thick and creamy, and they're just a delight to use. They're just vibrant. They're not as transparent as the other ones because they are actually gouache, so they're a little more opaque, but they work really well together with the other watercolors that I use. So sometimes when I want something a little bit more vibrant, I'll use the liquid ones, or in this particular case, I'm using these because there's some colors in that will be really nice out of the pan. So that's why I'm going with these ones for now. If I decide that sometime as I'm streaming that I want to add a little bit of something extra, I might go back to my liquid ones, and I've got them on standby so I can. The other thing is that as far as the palettes go, I'm not sure if anybody was interested, but just in case, when I use the liquid watercolors, of course, you have to have a palette to put it on. And you can get these cheap plastic palettes from any art supply store. They're plastic, they've got lots of little wells. They're really good for holding watercolor pictures. And if I just lean over here, I'll just grab some. Excuse I. All right, so these little ones that I generally use, and you can pick them up very cheaply. But I also use, my favorites is a porcelain dish, and you can get these online. They're a little pricey though, so good value for money is if you don't want to be spending a lot of money on porcelain palettes, which is not really necessary. What you can do is go down to your local Salvation Army store or op shop and have a look at. Sometimes they sell really inexpensive porcelain serving dishes. You know, the small ones with little wells in them. In fact, this I have one which I got, which was a hors d'oeuvre dish, which is white ceramic, has lots of little round areas in it for olives and things like that, and ends up being a perfect size for watercolor. And it works exactly the same way as buying a very expensive ceramic palette like this from Amazon or online. So there's a bit of a tip for you. If you ever want to look for a cheaper alternative, just go down to your local Goodwill store, Salvation Army, some, whatever it is for you. Be different in different countries, but basically they sell dishes and things, and it's a cheaper alternative. You can sometimes pick them up for hardly anything, and it works the same way. So there you are. However, today, because I'm using the kuratake out of the pan, I don't really need to use a palette. I'll have it on standby, so when if I decide to mix a few colours together, I'll still use a palette. So I'll just put that down. I've also got watercolour, sort of clear watercolour. And excuse I forgot to grab. I've actually got two jars. I'm meant to have two jars, two water jars. One that stays with clear water in it that you use just to rinse your brush each time and keep the water clean, and another one that you use time and time again just to rinse your brush and with each color after each color. That'll get muddy, so it's always good to have one which is always clean water so that you don't need to worry about having to run out and get clean water to add, and that your paints don't get really dirty. Here, back to the Philippine Eagle. This fellow I chose because it has this lovely fierce expression, and I've traced it down in graphite onto a sheet of the same paper I've been using for the last few weeks, which is a field pad, which is a Raldo field pad, and it's very good for general painting. You can do gouache or colour pencils or things like that on it. Also good for watercolour, as long as you don't make it very, very heavy on the watercolour, because as soon as you add too much water, you'll find that the paper will buckle, and it's very hard to work with paper which is buckled. You can, at the end, you can actually smooth it out when the paint's dry and you finished your picture. There are ways to flatten your paper again, and I might share that one day. Maybe not now. Get to painting. And this eagle has very interesting plumage, and that's why I've chosen these kuratake, because the eagle itself has this really nice yellow on its plumage in here. And I thought what I might do is I'll just add it, make the paper a little bit wet, not too wet, because what will happen is, as I mentioned before, it will buckle. So welcome to anyone who is watching, and thank you for watching. And I hope you enjoy the stream. And if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, then you'd want to say hi, please feel free to pop on and say hi. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about anything I'm doing. So starting off, I'll just put some colour in. These kuratake paints are quite thick, so I will sometimes mix them. Always have a piece of paper which I can just try the colours out on, and sometimes I'll go back in and dilute them a bit. But for now, I'm going to try and capture this beautiful yellow that he's got on his crest here. They have mostly white, but sometimes that they have this lovely orange up here, and they have these blue beaks, which is really amazing. And I'm using a brush here, which is just a little bit too small for what I'm trying to do. I have a range of brushes that I use, and sometimes I'll definitely switch between them. So here's a little bit of a bigger, flatter brush, and this one's usually my acrylic brush, but I can use them for both acrylics and watercolors, because acrylics are effectively watercolors. And I'm not sure how this will go. And as I say each time, I never know how this is going to turn out. So I'll just keep painting until I get something I like and add to. Um, with the kuretake, I'm not too sure. I think they dry pretty well true. So it's not always good to see, like you can't always tell how it's going to turn out. And watercolors will dry lighter as a rule, but acrylics tend to dry slightly darker. So if I just dilute this, and as I said, I may go over it with my liquid watercolors just for a bit more of a translucent effect, and I'll work the two together often as not. I have some yellow, um, which I'll keep handy so that I can use it. And sometimes I'll go back in, as I said. If this is sort of a little bit too orange, I can knock it back with a bit of white later on. So I will continue on. And the paintbrush, as the last one, this one's a little bit too big. But for a broad sweep of colour, I don't mind these sort of flat, round sort of brushes. It doesn't say what type of brush, but it's basically rounded. It's not a round brush, but it's a flat round. I will get another paintbrush that I have, which is also one of my favourites. I tend to use the same types of paintbrushes, so I'll tend to use the rounds mostly because they're easier for broad sweeps of colour and also for the more delicate because they have a nice point on them. So I'll alternate between using the fine brushes and the point of it and the other bits. So the kuretake, as I said, is a gouache, so it doesn't work exactly the same way as the liquid watercolors. So it's a little bit of a trial and error sometimes as to how it might go when it's diluted. I'm not too sure whether this fellow here will take me that long. So I'm just going to stream. I've got from 2 till 5 today. So if anybody wants to pop in and say, hey, I'll be here. And in the meantime, I'll just continue painting, which is what I tend to do. I'm painting and chatting. So that's what I will do. Okay, so I hope you're all having a very nice day. It's a lovely Sunday afternoon here, and I always stream on a Sunday because I do like uh, it's just a really nice day, and it's a very nice time for me to relaxing to come and stream and join all you the lovely community here at Twitch from places all the way around the world. This is never usually true to colour necessarily. With the different lights that I have and no natural daylight generally, I have a filtered light which comes in from behind me, and it makes the area at the moment at this time of the day, it's very nice. But as it starts getting darker, it will start getting darker on my page as well. So I have behind me here, I have a studio light, a softbox light set up so that it casts like a daylight effect on my artwork and just makes it easier to work. And I'll see if I can tap on this on my screen to try and that's better, focus it a little bit better. It's a little bit out of focus there, so I like to see what I'm doing. Not always sure. And these paints are interesting, but it's very hard to judge how liquid you can make them based on how they look. That's why I've always got a piece of paper so that I can see in advance, make sure I'm not actually going wrong. And these birds are quite lovely. They have this really interesting white, but sort of a brownishy with brown tips and orange plumage here, like a crest, and then the rest of them is quite vibrant white, and then the beaks, as I said, are blue. So it's actually quite intriguing to paint. And I'm hoping I can capture it the way and do it justice, and not try and make it trying to make it not too bright or not too heavy. It's just a little bit orange there. It's not exactly what I had in mind, but it's it's sort of the look I was going for. And these ones you can thin them out somewhat, but you've just got to be a very careful you don't um, they don't act the same way. But I can go over them with other colours, and I do like the bright colours. If you've been watching any of my previous streams, you will know that I do like bright colours. So last week I did a picture of a barn owl, and that was oranges and greens. I like to work with contrasting colours sometimes, so it's a bit more interest and it's not so dull, because it's very easy to make it look exactly like the bird, but I tend to try and avoid doing that because there's lots of people out there that can do, you can take a photograph and make something look exactly as it is. But if you do that, you may as well just have a photograph. So I find that I like to pick up different colours and try and make something a little bit more interesting from it. Just so, you're not replicating a photograph exactly. And so it's a bit more arty, if you like. Here I've got quite a bit of orange in here, but I will actually bring some brown in. And they have this, like I said, they have these lovely stripes. And the feathers on the plumage at the top, on the crest, are very odd. They have this dark brown stripe down the middle, orange on either side, and then white. It's most unusual, but I'm hoping I can capture that and give it that sort of a look, and still try and keep it true to its basic, you know, true to its form, I guess you'd call it, and then try and keep it looking sort of realistic without too realistic. I'm going to keep painting, and if at any time anybody wants to jump in, ask me questions and ask me any tips or tricks on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, I'm very happy to answer. I have a so what I do when I decide on the pictures that I draw, I have a tendency to have a look and see. I'm rather fond of birds of prey, so I will choose the birds of prey. At the moment, it's going to be my subject matter for a little while because there are so many birds of prey and they're all really lovely, and there's so many beautiful references out there. And I just I just really like birds of prey. They're fiercely intelligent, and you can see in their eyes they're just so focused. And I like to capture that sort of fierce intensity in the face, which is why I'll probably do birds of prey for quite a long while. So hopefully nobody will get bored with the subject matter, because I don't think I ever could get bored with the birds of prey. Eventually, of course, I mean, there's so many different types, so it's going to take a little while to run out of subject matter. But some of them are very similar. They look very similar to the others. So at some point, I will probably get to the stage where I will decide, no, I've done enough of these. I'll switch to something else, and I might not do birds of prey every week. I may, switch it out and do, um, I don't know, frogs or something like that. I haven't decided yet, but and one week I might do birds of prey, and the next week I might do, a portrait of someone, and that's entirely a possibility because I like to mix it up a bit and I like to do something different. So in here, I can go back over it. I'm trying not to lose the white, but what I can do is if I lose any of this white detail, I can go back over it with a white paint. And although it's not strictly speaking watercolour true, because you're meant to leave the white of the page wherever possible. However, in the case of this particular bird, or a lot of these, you can bring the white back in because they have this stringy hairs, and if you put the white paint in, you can actually make it look like you couldn't even tell it's white paint. It just looks like the white of the paper. So depending on your white and how you do it, you can actually get away with that. This picture here probably won't take me that long, and I always say that, and then it ends up taking hours because I like to take my time with them. But I'm going to try and give that impression of, I always keep a watercolor, just a bit of paper towel for dabbing up any spills or any mistakes, because that does sometimes happen. Often as not, when I am painting, I'll get a bit enthusiastic and a bit of colour or water might splash around, and then I'll end up having to try and lift it back up off the surface to try and see if I can fix it. In here, I've got a close-up. I can zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, and hopefully my camera won't decide to do something strange. As I said, I was having a lot of problems with my phone, which I use as a camera for the purposes of the actual artwork. The webcam, I use a webcam for my face, of course, but for this picture down here, I like to use my phone because the quality of the phone is actually quite good, and you can get quite sharp. And the program that I use, I have an Android phone for those that are interested and they want to know, but for the sake of detail, the program I have installed on it is called Droidcam X, and it is really very good for capturing. You can do a lot with it. You can zoom in, rotate your camera angle, zoom out, and you can really get in there. I can zoom in and show you what I'm working on without, so you can see the details without having any problems being able to see what I'm doing. And for that, I really do like using my phone. I've tried a few different methods of streaming and different things, and I did think of using the webcam to actually focus on the artwork, but I feel I have more control over the phone because I have a setup where I have you can just see the tail end of my phone here. I have a swing arm, which is like a lamp arm with a grip, and I fasten my phone to that, and then it's all ready to go. I can adjust it, I can swivel it, I can move it. So it's actually a very good setup now. It took me quite a long while to get the sort of setup that I wanted when I was streaming, and I had a lot of difficulties with the stream initially because I couldn't really get it the way I wanted it, and there were some troubles with bit rates and things like that. So if you're one of these people that stream, you'll most likely know exactly what I'm talking about. In order to set up a stream, particularly an art stream, there's so many things to consider, and that was definitely a learning curve for me. I had a lot of people ask me to, you know, wanted to see me record what I was doing, and my daughter, who is actually a game streamer, she suggested that perhaps I try streaming art, and there was a community for it. Although I must admit, I was a little dubious because I thought, why would people want to watch art in real time when if you have, YouTube, you can just pause it or fast forward past the boring bits. Well, I hope there are no boring bits, but there's always instances, and you don't want to miss anything, so you can just pause it and head out. But with live streaming, it's not so simple, and you can't really well, you can leave it. If you don't like what you're seeing, you can exit. But it took me a bit of getting used to, wondering why people would want to watch. But having watched some streamers myself, some art streamers on Twitch, I got to say it's actually a very good. It's really nice to watch, and it's really nice to chat to people in real time. So that's the main reason why I looked into it. But initially, like I said, it was quite a challenge to get it set up so that I could stream effectively and not get frustrated with how it was going or how I was going to set it up. There's a lot to consider when you're not really computer overly sort of technical or computer savvy. I know enough to get by. I work with computers all day, but not in the way where you could stream. And I never have to set anything up to record, so I've never done it before. So it's all new for me, and I it was a challenge, and it took me quite a fair while to get it set up the way I wanted it. So I had to invest a little bit of time and effort, a lot of research, trying to find out the best way to do it, which wasn't too expensive. And I ended up with, I'm quite happy with my setup now. So I don't think there's really anything that I need now to have it work effectively. My computer desk, which doubles as my study computer and also as an art table, even though I do have an art table behind me. But it works quite well when I'm streaming because I can adjust my phone and I can adjust my lighting. Even though I've not got any natural light, I do have the. I'm quite fortunate in that I have a ring light which I use, and I had purchased a softbox lighting kit, as I said, which wasn't too expensive, and it does a really good job of adding all that extra light that I need when I'm painting. So even if I'm not streaming, um, I can get the lighting that I need for taking photos of my work or just generally working on my computer desk. So it actually works quite well. And this is a nice. So here we have the Philippine Eagle. I've got a few browns on here, but it's sometimes hard to tell the right brown. And as I said before, I find working out of pans a little more tricky and challenging than working from my liquid watercolors because I have to dilute it to the consistency that I want to work with, and it doesn't always work out exactly the way I want to. So it's trial and error, and I sometimes end up with maybe not quite exactly what I was after, and so it's a little bit odd. But I'm still messing about. As I said, messing about with watercolor. Every single stream I do is a learning curve for me, and I'm always learning new things. So I will continue to stream as long as I am getting something out of it, as long as you lovely people are getting something out of it. And if do like what I'm doing, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. As I said, I do art constantly, so I generally don't stop. I do work a 9 to 5 job, so I don't always have time to do art, but I do always try. So it's something I really enjoy and I get a lot of pleasure from. So I always try to make time to get artwork done, to get something, to work on something. And yeah, I think it's nice for me to. I'd be working on doing artwork anyway. So as streaming at the same time is a bonus because I would, as I said, I would art. Nice word, art anyway. So why not do it in front of an audience? Why not record it at the same time, which is why I'm doing this? And if I can manage to inspire anyone else, then that's always a bonus. So if anybody is, oh, I meant to also say thank you to the new followers since my last stream. I appreciate anyone opening up my video and checking it out afterwards, even if you're different time zones and you haven't had time, or you just can't get on and watch my stream while I'm on because it just doesn't work for you time wise. Then thank you for opening up the video and watching me anyway. I've had a lot of views, so thank you. And thank you to those who follow me after watching my stream and after watching the video later on. So I do appreciate it. I appreciate all the feedback I get, and I appreciate people, taking the time to jump on and say hello. And in the meantime, I will continue on. I have the same thing where I try and visit streamers, people who are streaming at different times. But unfortunately, I would like to do a bit more, follow a bit more, and view a bit more. But often as not, by the time I get online and watch, it's the time zone difference just doesn't work for me. And unfortunately, lovely people that I do watch, turns out that you're never online. So I apologise if I've missed anyone and I haven't sort of had a chance to jump on and say hello. But as I said, often as not, by the time I get on, it's too late. It's finished. Stream is finished. But it's always nice to go back and see what people have done while I haven't been tuned in. And that's the main reason I go and watch streams afterwards in an evening when I get home from work. I like to get online and see what people are doing, what they've done while I've been at work. And yeah, I'm using Kuretake Ganzai Tambi for anyone who has come in late. And these are beautiful gouache, and they come in these ones. This is a set of 36, I believe, the ones I have. It could be 48, I'm never sure. Yeah, 36 I have. But even the smaller sets are just lovely. They're just beautiful to work with. They're creamy and they're smooth and they're just bright. They're a real delight. I really love them. That's why I was in two minds about whether I use these ones or my standard my go-to paints. However, I've decided to mostly go to these ones for now and see how I go. It's they are just as vibrant as my other ones, except they do respond sort of differently to. Oops, I will go over and I will lift colours using paper towel or back to my brush if I find I've put colours in the wrong spot. And I will do, yeah, they are lovely. They're vibrant. And even though they're not exactly the same, they still produce a lovely result. So when I have finished doing a very rough basic colours on here, as I'm doing, I will, if I finish before my stream ends, as it were, I will go over it with pen and ink, which is my usual process, but I never tend to, I tend not to include it very much when I stream, because often as not I run out of time, and I like to go back over what I've done. So my technique is that I will do the bulk of the watercolor painting while I stream because it's easier and I don't have to get right in and do a lot of detail. And then I do as much as I can while I'm streaming. And if I get the picture finished, that's great. But so far, I haven't really managed to get the picture finished while I've been streaming. Not exactly. I've had it almost to a point where I can say I have, pretty much got it the way I want it. However, there's always something which just needs to be tweaked. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to what I do. A lot of the paintings, I say a bit, but if anybody knows me or has tuned into any of my previous videos, you'll see that I'm actually a lot fussy, a lot of a perfectionist when it comes to my artwork. And I will constantly, tweak things because I come from a technical background, a technical illustrator, graphic design. So it's very difficult for me to relax sufficiently and let the paint do its thing. I like to control it, and I like to have some say in how it's going to look. So consequently, all my pictures tend to be rather detailed. And if I don't do it with the paint initially, I'll go back over it with pen and ink at the end and just add little bits here and there. Not enough so that it becomes a pen and ink drawing, but enough so it just adds a little bit of, what I like, which I'm happy with. So, and I guess it's cheating in a way, but as I said, I really like going back in afterwards and just adding some details that I might not have managed to get when I was doing the painting. And here I will do, as I go along, I will actually add a little bit of, detail and things with the brush strokes anyway. But I like to go back in and paint feathers. And I do tend to use the bigger brushes because I like the fact that you can hold a lot of paint in a bigger brush. So rather than keep on dipping it and things like that, you can do side strokes, like you can make big broad strokes, and you can go back in and you can use the tip of the brush, which I like to do just for the very fine details. So I do like to, add details, and I'll go over it and I'll remove some paint. And in here, I've probably got a little bit dark. There is a really nice, where is it? I have this lovely turquoise blue. It's called a blue aqua, and it is, and I'll shake it up because these ones do need to be shaken. This one's in the liquid watercolor, and it has this lovely pale turquoisey color, I suppose you'd call it. And you sometimes get where you get shadows where you've got a yellow plumage under the chin area here on the bird. It has this sort of a greenishy. It's probably a little bit. I can make it quite watery, and I'll need to make it quite watery. That's what I wanted. And it gives you kind of a. If I go over this area that I'm doing now with a kind of a green, well, with a blue, it'll give it a kind of a green shading like I did with the barn owl last week. I don't want to quite go quite as green, but I do want to give it that. Where you get into shadow, you often get blue tones, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Trying to get this sort of blue tone under the chin, and I like to, because these are translucent, you can actually, build it up. I will go in with the side of the brush. I will dilute it with water. And what I like to do is I like to do the brush strokes in the direction of the feathers or the fur if I'm doing an animal. And that's, I think, what gives it that, it's sort of a three-dimensional effect. So wherever you have the feathers, which, you always try and go with the direction of whatever you're painting. So if you're painting, a bird or an animal and the fur goes down, then go in the direction of the fur. Same with people's hair. If you're doing a picture of a portrait, which is my main specialty, not that you can tell because although I do portraits of animals, but I also do portraits of people. So where you've got the hair, you always do the brush strokes or ink strokes or whatever medium you're using in the direction that the hair falls. If you go against that, I mean, you can. It depends on the look you're going for. There's nothing wrong. You can't really do anything wrong if that's what the effect you're trying to achieve. But if it's not, you can actually come a cropper, or that's a lovely colloquialism, isn't it? Quite a Australian one. But you can really get into trouble if you are not trying for that effect, and you end up going in the opposite direction to the direction of the fur or the feathers, and then you'll end up with something which makes you look at it and go, there's something not quite right here, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. So it's always good to constantly assess what you're doing and try and work out if where it's gone wrong. And often as not, people will pick up on it. So if you've done something and you're not 100% certain, if, in other words, if it's not too late to fix it. You can always fix something, but you just have to be conscious of, sometimes it's harder to fix something that you've made a mistake on. You want to make sure that if you can catch it before it becomes an actual mistake. It's never too late, as I said in my previous videos. If you do make a mistake in what you're doing, if you can correct it, or see if you can correct it, that's always a good idea to see what you can learn from it, and just see what you can do to fix it, because sometimes you'd be amazed. At times you can find that things can be fixed quite easily, and other times when it really can't be fixed easily, then you know then you have to look at ways that you can see if you can correct it, or uh, see if you can, I don't know, learn from it and try not to make the same mistake. Here I'm bringing in this turquoise blue green color, aqua color, because the shadows from, oops, a little bit too blue, but it will go lighter. I like to bring a shadow in, because where a bird is white, one, it's very hard to paint white if you're using white paper, and it's a challenge to use different colored paper if you're painting in watercolor. There are different watercolor papers out there, different colored papers for watercolors, but it requires a different sort of mindset, and it's always a challenge to, you have to think slightly different on how you're going to tackle it, because painting on different colored paper will give you a completely different feel. So if you are if you have black watercolor, and there is black watercolor paper, you need to think quite carefully about the types of watercolors you use, because being translucent, they'll just get lost in darker colored papers. And if you want to, put, if it's an animal or a bird against a dark background and you're using watercolor, what you want to do is work out your composition beforehand and your tones, and work out how you're going to make that bird stand out against a dark background. So often as not, when I'm doing something like that, I will actually paint the background in, but leave the space around the bird. So I will do that with this one as well. I'll probably paint around the edges here to make this white plumage really stand out. But what I want to do is be very careful. If you make it too heavy, you'll find it's very hard to put. If you go over, it'll be very hard to put all the details back in, unless you get your white. You can get your white paint in there and alter it. But if you are working with a different coloured paper, just be aware you may have to go with paints that are a little bit more opaque. So a gouache, or if you're using pan or tubes, you're more likely to be able to do it than if you using the type of paints that I do, which is the watercolors, the liquid watercolors, because the liquid watercolors are already liquid and you can't get really much thicker. So you want to just be aware what you're doing. But I haven't actually painted on, sort of really painted on coloured watercolour paper. I'd like to give it a try one day, and I may do one day. But for now, it's a challenge enough just painting on white paper and getting the effects I want. Here I am bringing some of this blue under the beak here to try and lift the beak up. I'll keep working on adding small amounts. My style is I like to do a lot of glazing, so I'll go light and keep adding layers and layers and layers that way instead of just putting something dark down first. Because once you put down a color which is really bright, it's very hard to lift it back up, and it's hard to go back in and make any changes that you might need. Whereas if you use layers, little bit at a time, probably don't need to go quite as light as I'm doing, but I like to be quite subtle. Otherwise, if I make a mistake, I can lift it or correct it. But if I go too heavy, I find that I can't really do much with it. So I'm going to be very careful. And I'm adding a bit of blues in some of the white. As I said, we've got white. It's not generally white. The whites that you see in nature generally have a reflection. So you can get reflections of the sky or the surroundings. And I like to put those in to my paintings if I'm doing pictures of birds and things like that. So hello, Bokabeshis. Good afternoon, Harmony. Good afternoon to you too. Welcome back to the stream. It's always nice to see familiar names, and and it's always good to chat. How are you doing? Are you having a good afternoon? I cannot remember which area you're from. Ooh, you're painting the Philippines eagle. I am, yes. Do you recognize it because you're from the Philippines? Yep, that's what I think. That's what I thought. And the Philippines eagle is just marvelous. I saw this picture and I thought, yeah. And I just thought, wow, I haven't seen this one before. I haven't seen this bird before. And I found this reference and it looks so fierce. It is majestic, yeah. I just like birds of prey because they are so lovely and majestic. And this particular photo reference is just phenomenal. It's it's looking down and it looks really fierce, and they're marvelous. They've got these really interesting colors, haven't they? It's I just like painting sort of slightly different types of birds, and this one is I found it really interesting because the what caught my attention, apart from the expression and all that on it, is that they have these blue eyes, and that spun me out. I thought, well, this is incredible. Like most of the eagles you see, the pictures of eagles are they've got yellow or orange eyes. Most of the predators they do kind of have this orange or gold or yellow, but these particular eagles have blue, or at least so light coloured. In this particular picture, it looks blue, and I had to paint it because I just found it really interesting. And the beaks are so bright and colourful that you just have to. I had to give it a go. And the beaks, which I haven't done yet, but the beak is blue, so it's probably not the blue I was after. What I'm actually after is a light ultramarine. Oh, that was a light ultramarine. Okay, I'll try a darker ultramarine. It's always a fun trying to get the colour right. Is Yeah, they have blue eyes or a little bit grey. Yeah, that does. It does look. It does kind of look. Well, I suppose it could be grey. The photo just sort of makes it look like it's sort of a blue colour, and the beaks are fascinating, like blue, bright blue, and it's really interesting. And I just had to paint it because yeah, they're just fascinating creatures. And I love the blue. And you know me, I just like adding blue to most things. It's always fun. I love the colour blue, so what are you going to do? And yeah, today I'm using my Kuretake gouache instead of my usual paints of choice, which is it's a little bit blue. It's not quite what I had in mind, which is these really interesting. They have different colours, these ones. So I thought I'd give it a go. And I can always go back over it with some other colours. Like I can get my watercolour paints out anyway. But I really wanted to try and get this sort of bluishy effect. And I did like some of the oranges and things like that that are in the Kuretake. So I thought I'd give it a go. And yeah, I'm quite happy with it. And they have this really nice, like, beautiful blue, like a darker blue, and they're lovely and fierce. And I had to capture it. So I thought it's going to be a challenge for me to do around this area here because they've got these like dimples. It's almost like a dimpled effect. This bit is sort of dimpled, and then this bit is really smooth. So I'm hoping I can capture it. But the eyes are they're really nice. So I thought I'll just see how I go with the effects here. I've tried to use a bit of pencil line and actually draw them in. Not sure how I'll go, but if I just wing it, pardon the pun, bad pun, I will try and see if I can get that effect in there. And the good thing about these is that you can, because they are gouache, you can actually make them quite thick, and then you can thin them right down too. So I should zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm doing. Since I'm working on the beak, let's see if I can get right in there. Oops, tap on my to try and get the picture in focus. There we are. And then just try and work on this bit in here. I'll just stipple it with my paint and see how I go. They have this bit. Yeah, it's an experiment for me, so it'll be interesting to see what I get. And it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, as long as I have a an effect which is kind of right, then I'm quite happy with that. And this bit's light, and as I said, I can keep working over it and adding colours to it. So it's going to be a challenge for me. So I'm actually going to try using this paint in a slightly different way. And yeah, that's always a challenge for me when I do something different. Whoops, that's a little bit too dark, but I can go back in and dilute it. Whoop, now I'm using a bit too much water. It's kind of a happy medium between, it's sort of a balancing act between using too much water or too much paint and then trying to work out, what you need to do to kind of fix it. And I think, and because these are sort of creamy, you can do some really nice effects with them. And as if I sort of dot them or stipple them, I might be able to get that kind of a dimpled effect on the face, which is what I'm actually trying to do. But I am still going to go over it at some point with they still do have a darker area. So I don't want to actually lose it by doing too much fiddly stuff. But I do like to give that effect, see how I can get this bird looking, kind of how I want it. And it has some really nice purple colours in here too. So if let's see, that goes around like that. This bit's darker. It's always a challenge for me to try and work out how I can make it kind of look the way I want it to look without overworking it. So that's just, I'll just quickly do this, try and colour in some of this, make it a bit more mottled. And that bit's smooth. See, the difference in textures on the beaker is quite interesting, and that's why I choose this too, because I like the various sort of different textures where you've got this really nice smooth area, and then you've got this lovely darker, sort of stippled effect. And I am going to cheat and actually use some of this. I will most likely, because that's not blue enough for me, I will most likely use a really nice shade of, hmm, see, if we're limited in my colours, what I have available here on the Kuretake is hard to tell what I have when I see it in the pan. That's a nice blue. I think I might go with that. And I can go back over it with, oops, I've picked up something on my paintbrush. I'll have to, that's better. Have to be very careful with your paints to keep your paintbrush clean and not get any dirt on it. That is always a challenge for me because I'm always picking up colours and pieces of dirt. We have cats, so it's always a challenge to keep my palette clean and to stop dirt from falling on my work. I overwork, you know, have things on my desk. I've set this up slightly differently, as you can see. I've actually put a tablecloth, tea towel under my surface because what I found last week was that when I picked up my paints to put them away after my stream, I had I had watercolor paint all over my desk, and that was a bit of a concern because I wasn't actually planning to have watercolor paint all over my desk because it's actually my work desk, my computer desk, not necessarily my art desk. So, and the watercolor gets picked up. This watercolor is picked up and just transferred around everywhere. So I was a little bit concerned how easily it was spreading around. Oh, this is picking up. So this paint, I have to be very careful because it turns out that I have, yeah, with the liquid watercolors, I can be a little bit, it tends to, once it's dry, it tends to not pick up. But what this one is doing, I have found quite by mistake, is that I've gone over it with water and it's lifted up what I've put in. So I'm going to put this colour back in again, and this time I'll actually put stripes so that I go in the direction of the beak and make it look more realistic. That's my theory, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Not as opposed to, oh dear, I appear to have made a mistake. So let's fix that, shall we? I just say, oh no, I meant to do that. But this is what I do. I will paint, and then if I don't like the way it's looking, I will just change what I'm doing. So I never know. That's why I'm always saying I never know what I'm going to end up with because I never do. So what have you been up to, Boca Bashis? Have you been busily working, or have you been having a break from it all? So what are you working on at the moment? It's always like to hear what people are doing, and it's nice to catch up. I'm learning this new dance for one of the orgs I'm in. Oh, okay. What's the dance? What type of dance is it? And I'm currently studying for my chemistry test tomorrow. Oh, okay. Thank you for tuning into my stream when you should be studying for your chemistry test. Oh, I would find chemistry very, very difficult. It's not something I was ever very good at. So, yeah, I'm just following a dance cover to That's What I Want by Lil Nas X. Don't know if that's what I may know that one. I'm not sure. So I haven't had a chance to listen to much of the modern music these days because I just haven't been on following anything. Tash, my daughter, she has Spotify, so she'll often listen to new things, but I haven't had much chance, as I've said. I've just been really busy working and keeping busy doing other things. So I tend not to keep up with I'll put some turquoise in here. There's no turquoise in there, but I do like it. And I'm going to add turquoise to it anyway. I'll probably remove it in a few moments when I decide that that's probably just a little bit too turquoisey. I'll just fill this area in because I don't like the white page so much harder. Yeah, I used to think I was okay at chemistry at ninth grade, but 11th grade chemistry is just different. Yeah, I never did chemistry. I was never that good at that level of academic thing. I was better at I was good at the arts and things like that. And, I only ever did art. So I did, um, although I did early childhood studies at school and I was quite good at that. So that's good because I had kids and grandkids. So that came in handy. Clothing and fabrics was another thing we used to do. You're most comfortable doing math. Oh, wow. I was never that academically inclined. I always struggled with maths because maths is just one of those things that I find it really hard to wrap my head around. Didn't really understand it. I understand it better now, and I know enough to get by, but I'm actually not that good at it. Not I can't work things out in my head. I have to write things down. I can add up and I can subtract and things like that, basic maths, but it just makes sense to me when I do it. Oh, well, you've got to have people who are good at maths because that helps the people like me who are not. We've got somebody to go to when we want to ask stupid questions about certain puzzles and certain things in maths. How do I work this out? That sort of thing. So, yeah, I sort of defer to people who are better at it than I am. My brother is an absolute whiz. And he's actually an industrial chemist, so he is a lot better at it than I am, and he always has been. But ask him to draw a picture, and he's really, really bad. Even his stick figures, leave a little bit to be desired. So we can't always be good at everything, and that's why you have people who are good at math and those that are good at other things. So I guess you have more the creative types and then more of the types who are analytical. I mean, I'm good at um, spatial things, which shape fits in which area and that sort of stuff. I'm good at that kind of spatial relationships, but I'm the actual figures, numbers. Nah, it's definitely not one of my strong points, that's for sure. I wish I could say it was, but unfortunately, like I said, I know enough to get by, but I don't actually, I'm not very good at it. I just admit I'm not good at it and leave it to those that are. So, you know, that's that's why we have people who are brilliant at it and those of us that are not. So, my mum's really good at maths. She's really good at working things out. So, I guess, I don't know, I definitely didn't get, I think my brother must have got it off my mum. She's actually very good at working out figures and things, just numbers. I'm just, no, it's not me. So, yeah, you're really bad at stuff like writing essays. I'm not too bad, I suppose, at English. I'm better at English literature and things like that, but it's still not something that I really want to be doing. I like reading things that other people have written. Um, quite fond of reading things other people have written, but as far as writing essays, did a lot of that at school, but I don't really have much call for it when I'm in my job. I don't really need to do it, so I tend not to. It's not that about some of writing things is writing emails to people, and I'm quite good at that. But yeah, it is a tricky thing. Some people are very very good at English, and some people are really good at maths and chemistry and all that sort of thing. And some people are good at music, and some people are good at art. And if you're lucky, you're good at quite a few of those things together. Unfortunately for me, maths isn't one of my strong points. So yeah, I'm happy with I'm happy with that. So I don't lose any sleep over it. Let's just say. So yeah, I am quite happy to just sort of do what I do. Um, admit I'm good at some things and not at others, and that's quite all right with me. So yeah, I do like dancing though. I do enjoy dancing. I don't much of a chance to do it, but I do like it. So uh, it's been a while. It's been a while. So here I've gone into using a bit of liquid watercolor. I said I was trying to just use the kuretake, and I will mostly, but there are some colors that just work better in the liquid watercolors, and I do like to like this is this lovely, um, this is a lovely ultramarine blue, and I do like the ultramarine blues because it has this really nice. I think what I'm doing is I'm actually using a paintbrush that is a little bit too big for what I'm trying to do. And I'm using a larger. Yeah, I think my paintbrush is a little bit too big. It's always tricky to work out which paintbrush I should use. I keep switching between using um, the small one and using the large ones, and then going, oh, I never know which one I'm supposed to be using, so I'm always switching between. And then the big ones might be better at one thing, but they're not so good with other things. And then I switch to the smaller brush, and then I find that it's too small. I'm going to just bring a bit of dark blue in here. I will go over it with uh, like an even darker shade. It's very dark along here, so I'm going to just go into it with this lovely ultramarine blue, but I will actually make it darker because it really needs to be almost a black in here, but I'm really reluctant to do a black because I don't want to spoil it. But I'm making it dark here so that it gives me an indicator of where I have to put my darker colours, and I'll just build it up. But I do like putting the blue down first, so I've got a pretty good picture of where the shading goes. So, and they do, this is this lovely eyebrows, fierce eyebrows. And stippling again, stippling with my paintbrush. And I will go over it with pen and ink. And that's why I use pen and ink, because there's just some areas that just work better when you're using pen and ink, and you need to get some details you can't quite get with a paintbrush. I can't quite manage it with a paintbrush. So I will put the dark blues in, and then I'll go over it. Sometimes I'll go over it with a darker shade of blue, and sometimes I'll just go over it with a Payne's grey, which is that lovely blue grey that I have. And sometimes it's, yeah, I just need to see where the darker areas go, and then I can correct it as I go along. And some areas will actually be black because it needs to be. I don't want to change the shape of the eye because the eye is very important to most of the portraits that I draw. Well, any portrait. If you don't get the eyes right, you can really mess it up. So it's a difference between, having a okay portrait and one that's really quite good. And I like to think that my portraits are quite good without false modesty. Um, I do enjoy doing portraits, and that's sort of really what I've spent a lot of time doing and a lot of time practicing, because I do like doing them. And the main reason I do like doing portraits is because I love doing the eyes. The eyes are got to be my favorite part of the portrait. The eyes are the mirrors of the soul, they say. And me, I really believe that they're definitely the mirrors of the personality for sure. So that's why I spend a lot of time with the eyes. But what I will sometimes do is I seem to be spending a lot of time with the eyes now, but I haven't actually done a lot with the eyes yet. I just sometimes will put in the rough sort of idea of how I want the eyes to go, and then I will go over it later. So I'll paint the eyes in, but only insofar as just so I can get an idea of how the rest of it's going to sit, and then where I need to work out different shadings, or just I don't like to spend too long just focusing on the eyes first, because that will sometimes throw out the rest of my picture, and then I can't get it balanced. So I know I've watched a lot of artists who work from the top down, and they kind of start at the top and work down and almost in a line, go from here right down little bits, like almost like a printer. I honestly don't understand how they do that. I can't I can't do that. I like to. work on tones throughout the whole picture as I go. So I know that if I'm going wrong, if I'm working on the whole picture, I can say, I'm going to do, this is this dark shade here, and that needs to be, down over here on the beak, and it also needs to be here, and so on. If you go from the top down, you can, sort of constantly compare to what you've done, but it's a lot harder to get that kind of effect and know how you're going to sort of what it's going to look like when you're done. And sometimes you get a bit lost in the detail and then you've gone too dark. Whereas if I just start off working in a little bit of blue, same blue I've done here, and I'll use the same blue in here. And then if I need to, and I think it's not quite doing what I want it to do, I can either dilute it or I can add some more, the darker colors to get that idea, that kind of a balance within the picture. Because if you stick with just one area, yeah, you might work this area, this bit at the top might be quite dark, and then you get down here and go, oh, that bit here, there's actually a darker color or there's a lighter color that I've missed, and it's very hard to correct it once you've done that. So I actually do really like to, sort of assess as I go along, which is why I really like taking my time and going back over and adding extra shades. As you can see here, nothing's ever flat. Nothing's ever flat with me. I find it really hard to paint very large areas of flat color because my eyes have this tendency to see all the different nuances in the colors. So I find that I'm constantly reassessing. So in here, I'm going, oh, okay, it's quite dark. But what I will probably do, and because that beak is actually quite blue, I will get a cobalt blue, which I don't have handy. Let me just scroll back, swing back and grab a blue if I can find it. Here we are, my standard blue. And I will say, oh, this needs a bit more blue and this needs a bit less blue and this needs a bit more yellow and so on. And as I said before, I'm constantly assessing. So when I said I would just be working with the Kuretake paints today, yeah, that was a plan. But best laid plans tend to get shuffled around when I'm painting. So I like to just change it, mix it up. And as you can see, I am getting this sort of an interesting effect. I don't know how I'll go with that. I have a really nice, I'm just seeing if I can find that. There's a sort of a violet colour. And I'll see if I can find that on my Kuretake. Yeah, it's a sort of a reddishy purple. It has this area in here, a sort of a purpley colour, and sort of in here as well. So I'll add these colours. It's almost colouring in. I know it's just like adding colours to things. And just mix it up a bit. So I never know. I never know. Sometimes you might look at that and go, "What on earth has she done?" Adding pink to things that it's not there, and I like to blend too. So as I said, this area here is quite interesting because it's got sort of quite intense dimpled. I think it's really coarse hairs, so it's like pores, and it's going to be really interesting to try and get that in, and it is tricky. So what I'm going to try and do is just get the basic colors in, and then I tried stippling with the color, but it's not quite what I'm trying to do. So what I will do is, as I'm assessing it, I'm looking at it going, okay, well, how do I get that effect? And the way to get that effect is I can do one or two things. I can either just put it in with paint and stipple it. I have a roughly the way I want it, or which is what I will probably do. So I'll go over it with pen and ink later and actually add it in because it's quite difficult to reproduce just with your paints. Sometimes it'll work, but it's actually quite tricky. So I'm going to keep sort of adding these colors to the beak and mottle. I'll still create like a mottled effect. Every time I do a picture, I always have something different to work out, like a different challenge. And this eagle it's a challenge in a different way because I haven't done one of these eagles before, and they are they're quite interesting. So, given that you're from the Philippines, Boca, um, do you know much about these eagles? You know about their habitats, and have you seen them around, or do you only just generally see them in the zoo? Because I haven't done a lot of research on these particular eagles and what the habitats are like and where you see them. If they're, I don't think I've seen them around because I live in the city. Yeah, that's generally the case with a lot of these birds of prey. We have these nice ones that live that are, in Western Australia, but you don't generally see them because if you live in, average suburbia or you're not out in the country, you tend not to. I think I've seen them once when I was practicing golf in the driving range flying around. Yeah, well, they're nice to know that they're not just, I'm pretty sure they live in the jungle. They look like they would. They've got that kind of look about them. They do look rather ferocious. So I'd imagine they'd be very, very effective hunters, given the kind of look they have. But it wouldn't surprise me if they are in the jungle. As I said, normally when I do a picture, I'll actually research it a bit, so I have something to talk about with what I'm doing, so I can say, oh yeah, this is a Philippine eagle, and it, this, that, and the other. But I kind of ran out of time, unfortunately, so I didn't get a chance to. Um, I think they eat monkeys. Oh, oh good lord! Good grief! They must be pretty big then. They must be a decent size if they eat monkeys. Philippine eagles do eat monkeys, but they also prey on a whole host of animals, both large and small. They have been known to hunt bats, civets, flying squirrels, and macaques. Wow. They also eat birds, including other birds of prey, snakes, and lizards. You Googled it. Oh, well, thank you for doing that for me, so I didn't have to do it. So that's very good information, and I'm glad I was able to read that. And anyone who is watching the video later can get that information from the video. Thank you, Boca, for the very informative information. You're welcome. Thank you. So yeah, are they, um, does it say whether they are large? I'd imagine they would be fairly big. If they can take out a monkey, if they can eat a monkey and some of the other, birds of prey and things like that, I'd imagine they wouldn't exactly be small birds. They look like they'd be big. They've got that kind of look about them. Yeah, they're very, yeah, they're very scary looking. That's for sure. I said I was going to actually go over this with pen and ink, and I probably will anyway, but I do like the idea of putting in the dots just to give it, like I've done here under the cheeks. And it'd be nice to just get some of these lines in, and I'll use the tip of the paintbrush for that. I like exciting things. I like doing exciting things, and I like to add things that I think might be. So that's probably a little bit too dark, but they do have this interesting patterning around here, and I can probably just thin it out. Quite quite detailed, and it goes in one direction, like specifically. I'm trying to get that effect. 3 feet in height. They are around 3 feet in height, so like the size of a 2-year-old baby. Wow, that's a decent size. They're pretty big birds. So yeah, that you probably have a go at you if you were close enough and you were threatening. I wouldn't want to take one on, even if they're only the size of a 2-year-old, because look at the beaks on them. They're vicious, vicious things. Quite nasty looking. So I'm guessing they're, yeah, that's the reason I do like raptors and birds of prey. Yeah, I bet their wingspan is really wide. Yeah, I imagine it would be. A lot of them are. A lot of the eagles and things. We have the wedge-tail eagles here, and they're actually one of the bigger birds in the world, and the wingspans are quite large, and they are actually bigger. They're actually slightly bigger than a bald eagle, the American bald eagle. They're very large, and they're really attractive, though. They're really pretty, but they do look vicious. We've had them in the zoo. We've seen them in the zoo, and they there's some other places around that do have them in the wildlife centres and places like that. And yeah, I like watching. I like seeing different going to these places and seeing these birds because they're really fascinating. So, and the wingspans, yeah, the wingspans always amaze me. Just, just how when you see them flying. There was an article. I'm trying to think how long ago it was. Which actually mentioned these two. This photographer here in Western Australia spent some time setting up his camera, and he waited at the side of the road. This is out in the country, and because he knew that's where the wedge-tail eagles, he could see them, and he wanted to basically capture them on film. So he waited at the side of the road for in his truck with his camera gear set up for ages because what he did notice because the wedge-tail eagles will eat the dead kangaroos off the road, so they're pretty big, and he managed to capture really amazing footage of these two um, eagles fighting over the carcass of a kangaroo, and he actually got that all on film. So that was quite an amazing picture that he created. And they were fighting, and like the fight in the air and things like that, and they go fully claw to claw with wings outstretched and the full thing. And yeah, it's quite an interesting thing to see. It's scary because you just sort of think, wow, you know, they're quite vicious, but they fight for their food as well. So we do get them here, and they are big, and it's quite an interesting thing. But yeah, so sometimes it does pay to be patient and wait for the perfect shot. And he had to wait hours apparently, but then I guess he's making the most of it now, I guess, because he was able to have patience because he'd seen them before, like he'd seen them around, and he thought if he waited long enough, he would actually manage to catch them, or at least one. He wasn't expecting to see two, but he struck it lucky. So that was quite amazing. It's just something that you go, sometimes they're being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's good just to set up your shots. Uh, but yeah, it's pretty incredible when you hear stories like that and you realize just how big they are. That sounds so cool. Yeah, I thought so when I read the article. I thought it was amazing. But I have seen them in the zoo, in the enclosures and some of the places when we drive down south to Margaret River and some of the wine regions down here. There are rehabilitation centres. They take the injured birds and they look after them until they're well enough to either release or they or they keep them if they can't be released because they aren't fit to be released back into the wild. But they will often have cages. You could go, tourists can go and drop in and see the birds. I'm going to go to the fridge and get the frappuccino I left in there because I'm getting kind of sleepy because this is when I normally nap. BTU, I have to study, lols. Be right back in 2 minutes. Oh, that's all right. Look, I'm happy that you've taken time out to watch my stream, and I feel sort of kind of guilty for taking up your time when you should actually be studying or napping, but I still appreciate it. So yeah, it's sort of one of those things. I'm going to add some. Whoops. Let's see. I'm going to add some more of this. It gets lighter. Hard to do these lines. I'm going to try and get the effect without. It's going to look very strange, but hey, I can go back over it later. That's that effect. Sort of a very hard to draw the this bit. I'm going to hydrate. Use that opportunity to hydrate at the moment because the throat tends to get a bit sore sometimes. So excuse me a moment while I'm going to mute it for a minute while I drink. Here I am back. Didn't particularly want you to hear me slurping away on my water bottle. So yeah, I'm just going to keep painting. I do enjoy doing it. As I said, I do enjoy doing pictures of eagles, and I will at some point probably do one of everywhere, from everywhere, hopefully everywhere. That's my plan anyway. And I do hope that I do them justice anyway, if nothing else, to try and get that effect, which I will go back in. As I said, sometimes you get things like this where you have a lot of detail in the face here. You can put it in with paint, but sometimes it just doesn't have that level of detail that you want. So I'm I can add it in a little bit, so I've got an idea of where I want the colours. But um, yeah, sometimes I will just have to go back in later on and add like a lot of these darker colours to give it the same sort of effect. So you can get the idea of the little pores on the beak and around the face. It's not too bad. I'm quite happy with the way it's turning out because it is kind of it sort of looks like it's meant to. But as I said, it's really hard because it's not a photograph, it's a representation of a photo reference that I have. So I'm not trying to replicate it exactly, but what I am trying to do is give you that give the sort of effect that these creatures are just amazing, and to give the idea of the texture around the face and around the beak. And it's a challenge in itself to capture the color as well as get the level of detail. And pen and ink is just wonderful. You can just come back in later and put the colors in, put the lines in where you want them. But this is pretty close, so I think I'm doing okay. The effect that I'm trying to get is sort of working, but it's really hard to get it exactly. I'm trying to get the direction, the direction of the the hair and how it sits, and also give it that three-dimensional look. So I will build up more of this dark around the eye because that's quite dark, and it should actually be more black. And there's a lot of detail to try and get in without, sort of trying not to spoil it, and trying to keep it looking like I want it to look. So there's a lot of blue in here, and it does go down in here. They have this interesting multi-tonal beaks, and there is blue in here too. So I'll have to go over it with blues, lots of. Oh, hello, welcome back. Hope you had a nice frappuccino. Um, I don't want to hold you up from your nap. Actually, if you need to nap before you do your study, I feel bad. I mean, I love having you here, but I hate to think I'm, stopping anyone from having the rest that they need to have before studying. I know how difficult studying is. So, so please don't feel as though it's like I'm not. Oh, you're good. Oh, okay. Well, look, you need to look after yourself too. I hate to think that. Oh, you know yourself better than anyone else, I guess, and Maybe not napping will help me sleep earlier at night, lol. Well, I hope so. It's always good to get a good night's sleep, and it's not always easy. I have the same problem the last 3 nights. I've had a lot of trouble sleeping, and I don't know whether it's the weather or what it is, but it's actually quite difficult. And I think it's just because I don't know. Wish I could work out why, but no, I spent some time again today out in the garden doing some gardening. We have a rent inspection coming up, and in 2 weeks, and so we have to get the garden sort of in a good condition so that so the landlord doesn't get cross with the state of the house. And we live in it's got a pretty big backyard, a lot of garden, and unfortunately, we don't really have time to working during the day. You don't really just have a lot of time to get out there and garden. So it gets, overgrown with weeds, and it's really hard to, spend some time out there and, do what you got to do. But I try and make time. But rent inspections just pop up. A big backyard is like a must-have for my dream house where when I grow up, lols. Big backyards are good. We've had a lot of big backyards. The problem is now I'm at the stage where I don't want a really big backyard because there's a lot of work involved in keeping it sort of maintained. It's quite hard when you have like when you get a lot of weeds and things in there, and it's just really difficult. I find it really difficult to get that sort of balance between having it look really nice and having it sort of end up looking like it's a bit overgrown, and they don't like that. The landlords, they tend to get a little bit tetchy. I just want an area for my dogs to run around without me being afraid that they're going to get run over by a car. Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. And if I had dogs, that would be a major concern of mine as well. We've just got cats, and they're sort of a bit old now, so they tend not to roam around. We have them in the backyard. They don't go out the front, so we're generally fine. It's an enclosed backyard. But the backyard we have here, you'd love it for your dogs. It's massive, and a lot of work when you're trying to keep it maintained. So a lot of yeah, a lot of lawn, a lot of garden bed. And the problem is that we had a little bit of rain, and the garden bed, there's not a lot of flowers and things in the garden beds here, because when we moved in, everything was dead. So the lawn was dead, all the garden beds were dead. There's trees, nice trees, sort of bottle brush, which are in flower at the moment, and the little parrots love them. We get the rainbow lorikeets in our backyard, eating the bottle brush. There was 2 or 3 of them I saw yesterday when I had a look outside, and yeah, they're just out near the kitchen, sort of near down by the kitchen window. They're really lovely little things, but they eat the bottle brush and they snip the flowers off, and they eat the nectar out of the bottle brush. So it's really quite nice to have the birds in the yard. So for that reason, I do like to have the trees and the bushes and things. I would hate to have a house where it just had a courtyard and no garden at all, because the cats like a little bit of grass. The cats need a little bit of grass. I like a bit of lawn. I like a little bit of lawn, but I wouldn't want anything. This is just that little bit too hard to maintain. If it's rather large, and trying to keep it weed free when you just don't have time to get out there and garden during the week, it makes it really hard. So in that respect, yeah, it's not so great. But I don't mind the actual idea of having a lawn, a yard. It's nice. I want to probably plant things, but I'm not a big fan of weeding, and we spent a lot of time weeding today. I spent about 2 hours in the garden weeding a small patch, mostly grass out of the garden beds, and it was not. It was all right, but it's not my idea of fun. Not something I want to be doing on the weekend. I'd rather be painting. So I guess it's just something you have to do if if you are renting. It's something you have to do even if you own your own house, I guess. It's just that you can sort of let it get a bit wild if it's your own place, but they tend not to like it if you let it get a bit too overgrown and it's not your house. So yeah, but so I spent some time today doing that, an hour. It's a good sense of achievement once you've actually got it looking, okay. So I suppose I can't really complain about that. But getting it looking okay is probably another matter. That's something that requires a lot of effort on my part, and then sort of spending time out there and not get burnt because I have very fair skin, and if I'm out in the garden too long, even with sunscreen on, I get burnt really badly. So I'm always conscious of not spending too much time in the garden, especially in the hottest parts of the day. Although I was wearing a big floppy hat and had a lot of sunscreen on, but it's yeah. The other thing about gardening is that I'm always very conscious of ruining my hands, and I I'm not that I'm not necessarily vain. I just if sometimes with some of the garden work if it gets quite difficult, like with pulling up the weeds is sort of a bit heavy, some of the really big weeds, the grasses and things. It's if I hurt my hands, then I can't paint, I can't do art, and given that I require my hands to be able to paint with, I if I do too much gardening, or my fingers cramp up, and it's very difficult. So yeah, apart from that, I don't mind getting out there in the garden and doing a bit of gardening, making it look pretty. But as I said, I like planting. Not fond of the actual maintenance part of it, but the planting part's nice. Oh, I think I've added a little bit too much blue there. So what I will have to do is, whoops, dropping my paintbrush everywhere, is go back in and just dilute that a little bit. The beauty of it, I can go back in and put colours over the top of other colours. And this is why I like combining the two paints. Sometimes you can go back over it and go back in and add colours and layer it and put translucent colours over the top, and you end up with this really nice, often it's not, this really nice effect. So I'm going to thin this out a bit. The beak is interesting because it actually curves under here, and I'm not sure I've done it correctly. So what I'm going to do is just remove some of this here. I'm always assessing, as I said, I'm always assessing to make sure that I'm staying on track with trying to make it look right. So it doesn't mean that you can't experiment a bit with what you're doing, because at the end of the day, the painting is only your interpretation of what something should look like. But I do like to make sure that it's at least has the average, um, has the right shading so that it looks correct. Because if it doesn't look correct, you'll notice it, and you won't be able to put your finger on if the shading, if I mess up the shading under the chin on the bird and I do it too interpretive, if I lose the overarching shape of it, you will see it. And this is the thing with doing portraits. You have to be, you can get interpretive, and you can end up doing whatever you like because it's your artwork and you can make it look however you like. But the one thing, even those artists who do abstracts and things and do portraits, it's still generally the basic instructions or the basic guide is make sure that whatever you're drawing, make sure that the perspective and the form underneath is correct. So unless, of course, you want something that looks cubist or completely surreal and it's not supposed to look like that, and that's fine. But if you're trying for realism, you really want to make sure that if you're drawing something from scratch and you have a reference, or you have a reference where there's some detail missing, you want to make sure that if you put detail in, like say for example you are doing portrait and you have a very dark shadow down the side of the face, or this side of the face, or this side of the face, and you, oh, hello, Tin Pa. Welcome. Welcome to my stream. Thank you for joining me. I was just saying with the form of an object. So if you are doing a portrait or something like that, or drawing anything realistically, or you want to get it right, if there's detail missing and you're adding it in, you want to really make sure that the detail that you're adding in is correct. So if you've got a portrait where one side is very much in shadow, and I've had this happen a few times in a few commissions, where the photo reference I've been given is missing details because they're just not there because it's a bad photo, or there's a lot of shadow, and I've taken the photo and I've tweaked it in. Oh, hello, Neuro Wolfie. Thanks for the follow and welcome. Neuro Wolfie. That's a name I haven't had before, so thank you for the follow. I do appreciate it. It's nice to get, to have someone new join. Hello. Hello to you. I hope you're enjoying my stream. First time chat. Oh, well, I hope you enjoy the chat. We've got a lovely some lovely people here. Boka's lovely and Tin Pa. They're both very nice and they're both very good to chat to. It's very comfy. Oh, glad. I'm glad you're comfy, and I hope it's something you enjoy. And I'm painting a Philippine eagle. Oh, another person, Eneracage. Eneracage. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I do hope so. I hope that I've got that name right. It's difficult sometimes to work out how to pronounce these. Yeah, as I was saying with structure. Hello, pizza.com. En Enenra Cage. Enenra Cage. Interesting name. Pizza.com. I had pizza for lunch. It was very nice. So, Enra. I think that's probably the easiest way to pronounce it. So I don't get it. So I don't try and pronounce the wrong name. I have that problem sometimes when it's got when you've got a very long name, username. First time chat too. Oh, welcome to you too. Same, I had pizza for lunch. Oh, there you go. Hello, Laboza. Wow, there's a few names popping up that I've seen on here before as well. It's always nice to get new viewers, and it's always great to see the old ones back. This bird looks dope. Oh, thank you. I thought that too, which is why I picked it to paint. It's a Philippine eagle, and Boca's from the Philippines. She can tell you all about the Philippine eagle. They're just amazing. They eat monkeys, apparently. So there you are. So I think I prefer pizza. I don't think I like the whole idea of eating monkeys. Ugh. Boca says, I had this leftover spinach cream cheese pizza, which is actually really good, and some leftover pepperoni too. Oh, yum. I had to do something really fast before I got on to stream, and if I don't eat before I stream, I tend to get very hungry, and you hear my stomach growling. So I didn't want to inflict that on anyone. So I actually had it was a it was it was like a margarita, but it was with blue vein cheese, blue cheese, and that was actually quite interesting. It tasted really nice. My daughter didn't like the idea, so she didn't have any. But yeah, I found it really yummy, so that was good. It does help. So a bit of pizza for lunch is quite good. When I say lunch, it's because it's about 3:45 in the afternoon here now. So I had a late lunch, but yeah. So the Philippine Eagle is I I selected the Philippine Eagle because I saw this photo reference and I thought, wow, it looks so fierce that I have to paint it because I do. If you've seen any of my other streams, you'll see I actually like doing birds of prey because I just think they're amazing, and because I just admire the focus. They're just Yeah, nature, gotta love it. And we don't get them here. So I'm in Western Australia, and we have wedge-tailed eagles, and we have barn owls and things like that, but we don't have these eagles. And I trying to paint a different eagle each time, and I found this picture, and I had to paint it because it looked so ferocious. So that's the reason I painted this particular one. But yeah, it is pretty dope. It's not, yeah. So excuse me for saying dope. It always sounds weird when an older person says, and an older person says some words that are kind of sit strange. But there you are. Um, moving right along. Yeah, the eagles are, oh, they're just nice. So I'll do eagles for as long as I can find really nice pictures of eagles, and I'll just continue. And then when I've run out of eagles, which will take me a while, I'll find something else to paint. So but I might intersperse it. Next week is Halloween, and I wanted to do something just a little bit more Halloweeny. And I was originally going to do a raven, but I found this really nice picture of another eagle. I think it's a vulture eagle. Yeah, I think it's a vulture eagle, and they're orange and black, and it's just such a Halloween color. I have to do it, so that's what I'm doing next week, but not on Sunday. So because Halloween is on Sunday, my daughter and I sort of like to, sort of dress up. We don't go trick or treating because it's not really an Australian tradition, although we do have people come to the door at times. I'm a bit old for trick or treating as far as, going around the neighbourhood. I don't have, little children or something I can take with me to pretend that pretend it's not me doing it, and that I'm doing it for my grandchildren or whatever. Um, so, but we do like to dress up. We do like to dress up so that when the kids come to the door, we always give them a bit of excitement too, seeing what we're dressed as. It's always a little bit more interesting, I think, for them if they see that other people are dressed up as well. So it's not just about the chocolate, even though we've been told we're actually quite good at the whole trick or treat household thing because we always have the good stuff. We always have this tendency to have a lot of chocolate as opposed to candy and stuff, but do still have candy as well, but we do the whole giving out chocolates, small individually wrapped chocolates, not sort of with everything. You don't want to be having unwrapped stuff. So yeah, so I'm doing an eagle, a vulture eagle. It's orange and black. So that's something to look out for, something to tune in for if you want to. But I will be doing it Saturday, so the Sunday is going to be spent for getting into costume, and yeah, so that'll be something I will do, and we'll see how that goes. And it's always very exciting. I love dressing up. It's a lot of fun, and I figure why not? It's not enough opportunities in life to dress in costume and have fun with it. So I figure I may as well. Oh, excuse me a moment. I'm a bit sniffy. I've had a bit of I was a bit out in the garden, so I'll just turn away from the camera for a moment. Oh, excuse me. I get hay fever, and I was out weeding earlier, so it's made me a little bit sniffy. I get affected by the the pollens a little bit. Um, yeah, so that's my plan for Halloween. So has anybody else got anything planned for Halloween? Has anyone got any special things that you do? Do you go trick or treating? Do you just spend time indoors? Do you have a party? So like I said, we don't really celebrate it much here, but we do, we do, we do actually occasionally, you know, I like to stay indoors and just wait for the children to come so I can give them lollies and stuff. It's fun. And I do like wandering. Where we used to live, there was this Tin Pa says, I have nothing planned for Halloween. Boka says, I have a small Halloween online party for the art student org I'm in on Thursday. Oh, that's nice. And another one for the non government org I'm in this Saturday. Wow, you have a busy social life. So, oh, this should be fun. That'd be good. Is it do you get into costume or is it just a party? Or are you really into the dressing up for things? I think it's half the fun of it, I think. Although, if it's work and things, we don't do anything like that. Not over here. It's not something we celebrate. It's more something you do just for the fun of it on the weekend, I think. It's taken off a bit more. You get into costume. Excellent. Oh, I love dressing up. It's so much fun. Because I mean, like I said, you don't have enough opportunities in you don't have enough opportunities these days to get into costume. So if you ever do get a chance to get into costume, why not? I like to, we do like to sort of hold parties just for the fun of it, not Halloween, but things like that. And we like to dress up. Boca, I'm going to be Sharpay from High School Musical for the one on Thursday. Oh, nice. And I'm going to be Laganja Estranja from RuPaul's Drag Race for the one on Saturday. Oh, that should be interesting. I haven't seen much of RuPaul's Drag Race program, but I have seen the ads for it, and I've seen one or two, and it just amazes me the costumes and the way they look when they get all done up. It's quite the thing. So that should be entertaining. That should be good. Be interesting to hear how that goes. The artistry and the talent, lol. I love it. I'm never usually that adventurous when it comes to dressing up, but we just have dress up parties. Every time we have like a birthday, if we can incorporate that into some sort of dress up, we will. That's what we do. That's what I do anyway. And my daughter loves it too. So we just love to get opportunity to dress up is always taken. So we haven't had a party for a while though. We had a few Halloween parties. For my 50th, we had a 50s themed party, so we all came in 50s gear. So anything 50s related, rock around the clock, pom pom skirts, anything like that. We did that, and that was a lot of fun. A lot of fun with that. So that's always something. What else have we done? Dressed up for Comic Con. My daughter and I did. That's when we get an opportunity to, which isn't very often. They don't have it here anymore, Comic Con. They used to, but yeah, they don't. They don't really. But every Halloween, without fail, we went. If you've been on my Instagram, you'll see a few pictures of me in Halloween get up, and we sort of love putting makeup on and dressing up, and it's a lot of fun. And we had what was a mermaid one year and a what was it some sort of a snow crystal ice creature last year. So this year, all going well, hope to turn myself into a bronze statue. So there you are. Don't know how successful I'm going to be, but that's so cute. Uh, well, you have to have fun. You have to have fun with it. So that's basically, yeah. We always go to a lot of troubles at Halloween. We always make sure we have lots of things for people who do come to the door. It's always a bit disappointing if we don't get anybody because we spend a lot of time sort of setting up. We haven't had a chance to sort of decorate the house too much because we've moved. So it's not always, we just haven't had the time this year with working and things like that. So maybe not this year, but definitely will subsequently years. Okay, so I've got this effect on the beak I'm trying for, and I will build up. It's a bit distorted in the camera. It looks a bit longer than it is. It's actually a bit wider, so it's not quite as long and skinny, the original, as what it looks like on the screen. There's a bit of distortion, but I do like the way it's turning out. And I'm putting a lot of detail in the face at the moment, but there's so much detail still to go. And I'm trying not to get too bogged down because, as I've said before, I like to, as I was actually saying before with the form, I like to make sure I double check all the time to make sure I'm on the right track. So where there's shadow, I don't want to go wrong. Like I like to put in constantly cross-reference with what I'm doing so that where it goes darker, I make sure that it goes darker. And if I do too much, like if you start on the top and work your way down, it's very hard to pull yourself up if you end up going wrong, like too dark. You might find that there are like like a lighter area down below and that makes everything look wrong if you don't have it looking right. It's hard to explain, but um, basically, I like to always cross check. So constantly. So where I will have a darker area or a lighter area, I like to go back and just make sure that I'm on track. So here I'm putting some dark on the beak, and the reason being that there's actually very dark feathers behind it. So while it's not the beak itself that I'm focused on with the darker areas, as you can see, I'm using that to build up the dark areas in the feathers. So it's kind of like a putting darker colours in to push colours out. So where the beak is sitting against other feathers, what I'm trying to do is push it forward. So take it away from the background and actually push it to the front, to the foreground. And it's not always the easiest thing to do, but if you don't get, if you're doing, I didn't finish saying it earlier, but if you are drawing a picture and you need to, um, for example, this eagle, if I just paint it randomly to make it look arty and I don't pay any attention to the structure of the eagle's face, it can look wrong and the eagle can look distorted, and then the neck might merge into the rest of the body and it will just look wrong. So often as not, if I'm doing a portrait, especially a person, if details are missing from the original photo, which has happened to me before, I will actually I'll recreate the missing details on the areas that are missing, like on the side that's missing. So if the a photo of someone has, for example, it's very dark on this side of the face and all the eyes and the features are completely black, the first thing I'll do is try and edit it in software to see if I can bring any of those colors back so that I can see, where what might actually be under there. And the next thing I'll do, if I can't do that, is I will recreate it from scratch. So I'll draw them in. So I'll work out where the eye sits compared to the other side, and I will recreate it by putting the structure, and I'll actually draw in, the eyeball and then the eyelid and then the pupil and around the eyes, and then I'll actually put the cheeks in and where the folds of the nose go, always comparing it to the other side, and trying to, so that when I look at it, when you go, okay, so now I've got a picture which isn't dark and light, it's just a picture of someone's face, and then I can paint the side. Once I've put all the details in, they're there. And in certain places, it will be darker. So even though it might seem like the whole side of the face is black, if you just paint it in just a solid color, and just make it all black and don't pay any attention to the form underneath, you will end up with a very strange looking portrait or picture because you will not have it will just look wrong, and might not be able to pick where it's gone, why it looks wrong. But you'd be surprised how much difference it makes if you get those details in advance. Even if you cover them up again afterwards, I will always put them in, and then, you're better putting them in, and then you can paint over the top of them and hide them. But if you don't put them in and you make it flat and you paint over the top and you just make it a solid color, it will never look right. And you'll be very disappointed with the results. So unless, like I said, unless you're trying for a 2D effect, a Picasso sort of flatten the whole face out and put an eye up here and an eye down here and so on, um, it will just look wrong. So I always try and make sure that I get the structure right underneath, which is why I'm always going back and forth. And I do trace the eagles down. Sometimes I will draw a bird freehand based on a reference, but if I want to get, if I want to really get the bird right, or where things sit, I'll always just get the reference, and then I will actually trace it, but only the main details. I won't trace every single line and wrinkle, but I will sort of do the main lines. As you can see, I've got a lot of lines here drawn, but that's by no means all the lines in the reference picture. If you draw in every single line, you will most likely send yourself insane, because, and I learned this the hard way, believe me. I used to try and think, oh, well, if I just put in all the details and put in all the lines, draw in all the lines, when I come to paint it, it'll all be there and I'll make it easier. No, definitely not. That's a trap to fall into, because what it in fact does is actually makes it significantly harder, because all of a sudden you've got all these extra lines that you can't reference them back, because there's just too many of them. So we end up with all these lines, and you go, oh, which one is that on the reference, and what's that? Is that the shaded part, or yeah, it's too hard. And so what I try to do, and I'll only generally trace where I have got portraits, in particular where I have a portrait of someone specific, like a celebrity, or if I'm doing a commission for someone and it has to look like them, and it has to be, really accurate, fairly accurate. That's when I will do the tracing. I mean, people might feel it's, cheating, but I don't think that at all. I think there's no harm in, there's nothing to be ashamed of in having to trace things down or put a grid or anything like that, because at the end of the day, no one is expecting you to be able to draw things perfectly off the top of your head. And it's not realistic to expect yourself to be able to do it either. But of course, on saying that, if you're one of these people that can do it, kudos to you. I'm really, I'm in awe. But for the most part, I think most people will just, they need help. And I'm one of those people, like, I'm not the sort of person who can draw things from scratch out the top of my head. I would generally nearly always use a reference, and there's nothing wrong with that. It has to be an original. Um, yeah, there's people that can do that, and there's people who can't. And as far as I'm concerned, if my strength is not that, then I will just focus on what I know I'm good at, and I spend more time on the painting, so I don't have time to spend a lot of time drawing freehand. And I have done it before. So back in the early days of my art career, a long time ago, I used to do that. I used to take reference pictures, and instead of tracing them down, I used to actually draw them, each single line, etc. But it takes a long time, and I'm not the sort of person who can, or I don't really have a lot of patience for doing um, a lot of freehand drawing. If I'm just doing a sketch or a drawing and that's all I'm doing, then I'm happy to sit and draw it. For example, if I'm actually drawing from real life and I've got an object in front of me, then I'll draw it, obviously. But if it's something I'm using as a reference, I like to make sure that at least the basic comes back to structure. At least the basic structure is there. And then I can spend all the rest of my time painting because let's face it, that's really all I want to be doing. I don't want to be spending time doing something I don't, you know, necessarily enjoy. So, yeah, that's pretty much what motivates me and what I do. But everybody's different. So, but if you have any questions about anything I'm doing or you want to know what art supplies I'm using, please feel free to ask because I'm more than happy to, chat about what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. Or if you just want to, you know, sit and lurk, I'm quite all right with that too. I'm quite happy to have people just listen or tune in, tune out. It's quite all right with me either way. I'm not fussed, and I'm happy just to have people on and watching. And it's always nice, I like it when people have time to, spare me some time and pop on and say hello because I love it when I love interacting with people. So this is a slightly different approach I'm doing here to what I usually do. Usually I just slap on colour. Those that have watched my previous posts will know that I will often just slap on colour. And I may yet do that, but for the time being, what I'm doing is trying to build up this. This bird has this beautiful, uh, sort of a very dark chocolate brown almost, chocolate brown plumage on its feathers. In fact, this is probably a brown, which is just a little bit too light or reddish. But I'm going to bring some of this colour in and give it the effect without necessarily doing it exact. And I won't follow a photo exactly. I will generally deviate from it. One, because I can't follow a photo exactly. It would just take too long. And trying to replicate something is fun sometimes, especially if you're trying to get it right and it has to be accurate for whatever reason. But part of the fun is taking something and interpreting it and making it something that's close or that looks gives the impression of without necessarily being exact. So yeah, this is quite a fierce looking bird. And as I've said before in my stream, I will actually often 9 times out of 10, I would say, is when I finish painting the bird at the end, where I think I've gone as far as I can go and I really don't think I can do any more. At the end of it, usually at the end of my stream, and generally in the stream you won't actually see that because by that time I've usually finished and I'm doing something else or I'm not online anymore. But in a day or so after I finish my stream, what I will often do is I will go back in after work and in an evening and I will take the picture, I'll have a look at it, I'll see what I need to do with it, and then I will tweak it. And that won't necessarily mean that I will, sort of change too much. And I generally don't. But what I would do is add just some little details which you may or may not even notice at the end of it. And you might see it on my Instagram page and think, oh, that's the same one. That looks like the eagle she did, but it looks slightly different. And the reason being that I like to go back in and assess what I've done and then work out what will improve it. So far, I tend my technique, I guess you'd call it, is I will often as not just put all the watercolor washes in and all the basic tones, and then afterwards I will go in and take some of the. So sometimes I will add a few colors here and there, and other times I will sort of just not do that much to it, or I'll just go add some pen and ink. I do that a lot. I do a lot of pen and ink, and I do love pen and ink, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to do, and it's so easy that I do actually, yeah, I do go back in and I'll just tweak bits and just add some extra details that might not have been there. So what I'm doing now is there's a shadow where the fluffy parts of the wing, which is here, fluffy feathers, folded over the top of the body, and where it's white, which it is, the body's white, I like to go in with the shadow colour. So in this case, it would be generally when I'm doing white, I like to add things like blues and reflected colours from the environment. So I will add things like blue and green, sometimes oranges, just depends on what works. And often as not, it will obviously be like a turquoisey green. It looks a bit bright there, but it will dry lighter. And sometimes it just, can blend it up and it just adds to it. Actually makes the white look whiter. It's a strange thing, but I like to add it anyway because it's fun. And I love to add colours. And I think sometimes I just, if it gets a bit boring, I do like to paint things that are a little bit colourful because it's easy enough to find things which are, from out there in nature. But so many times, and I've said this before, so many times there is no true, like you find a bird that's black, it's generally not actually black. It's generally got all these iridescent shades in it. It's very rare to find something which is either completely white or completely black. And I like to find the hidden colors and pick them out and then sort of try and incorporate them in the picture. Something different. And yeah, it's a fun thing to do. And I do really enjoy painting because it's relaxing for me. And it's always nice to get online and, sort of find people who enjoy watching what I'm doing and can provide some feedback and how I'm doing, and also to just watch what I'm doing. And I've been told it's can be quite relaxing, so I like providing entertainment for people. And if I'm babbling away, apologies if you're not into that. I like to let people know what I'm doing because when I'm online myself, I like to find out, I like to tune in to people and I like to watch other streamers. I like to see what they're doing and I like to hear what they're doing. And there's nothing sort of disappointing to me as, going online and finding a stream that I really like what's going on, but not being able to follow, what they're doing. And it is nice to get that feedback where people will actually say, "This is what I'm doing. I'm I'm painting this, and this is how I'm painting it. These are the materials I'm using." And I hope that what I'm doing is helpful for people, and that people are enjoying watching my stream to find out either more information about what I'm doing, or simply just to get an idea of who's out there and who's sort of doing what. And that's the reason I watch streams sometimes. I'm just adding color, and I love messing about with watercolors because watercolors are very pleasing. The effects are very pleasing to me. There's just something quite pretty about some of the colors and what they can do, and that tends to be why I refer back to watercolors a fair bit. Oops. And sometimes I add colors that are too bright, but I will blend them back in and try and see if I can fix it up. So yeah, there's a sort of a really enjoy doing something that's just a little bit out of the ordinary with what I'm doing with my paints, and I like to incorporate as I've said, different colors and try and make it look, try and give it a sort of a natural look without overworking it, necessarily making it look, too comic-y or too illustrative or anything like that. And I want to give the idea of fluffy feathers without sort of, without putting too much detail. And sometimes I'll constantly refer back to my picture and try and add some texture. And I will always pick pictures of eagles, particularly because I really like the different textures. And there's this really nice fluffiness to the feathers. And then you've got this big, thick feathers, which are quite smooth and glossy down here. And in here, you've got this quite um, scratchy, sort of pin feathery, fluffy feathers, kind of like a chicken sort of thing. And then you've got these beautiful, like long, long feathers on the top, which are quite remarkable, and they just really look. And I like to try and capture. It's not always easy, especially where you get to areas around the cheek and trying to, as again, like I said, it's hard to, sometimes really hard to capture the form, and I have to go back in and constantly work out, put in, where some of the darker colors are and some of the lighter colors, to just try and work out where the edge of the cheekbones are and where the head, when the head turns. I don't always manage it, but I try to get some of the form. So as I was saying earlier in the stream, when I'm painting pictures of anything, and this is people or animals or even just birds, I'd always try and do pictures. Always try and go with the same, where the feathers, the direction of the feathers, or the direction of, the fur and things like that. And I'm using a couple of collections of different paintbrushes. So when I paint, I will generally nearly always use the round, different sized round brushes. So I have a big thick one and a slightly smaller one and a very thin one. And I like adding details, and I'll constantly work over it. So what I'm going to do now, um, and this is my towel for dabbing my excess paint on. I will. I'm alternating between using my Kuretake and um, my liquid watercolors. And the Kuretake are interesting because they're thicker and creamier, and I can sometimes add in. I'm trying to work out where the darker browns go, because it has this. They have these lovely textured feathers in here, and I'm trying to add. It doesn't always work, and I will sometimes go over it with different. There's overlapping. It's tricky, and doing eagles is a challenge, and I do like to give myself a challenge. 9 times out of 10, I will always go for something that's always difficult, because why not? And also like to make things harder for myself, clearly. So I'm going to just try and add some browns. I'll mix a couple of shades, and hopefully I'll be able to add the colors I'm trying to do, but it's tricky. So I'm trying to get this pin feathers. They have these lovely pin feathers, and I've made it very difficult for myself in this instance because they're very unusual birds, and a lot of the lines that you add, that I'm trying to add, are they're very fine hairs, and trying to get them right, it's quite hard. So I'm just so So I do like to watch people on different streams. And the reason being because I like watching artists and see what they do with different things. And I love picking up different art techniques. And it's fun for me to watch, to see how other artists handle other challenges. And I do always challenge myself. So it's always good to see how other people do it too. It's very, it's tricky. And I will add, oops. So sometimes I add these colours that I think, why on earth did I do that? And then I can go back in, but then I'll go back in and see if I can incorporate them somehow and not throw my own work out. Now that sort of works. And it doesn't matter really, because even if you are trying to do something specific and it doesn't turn out necessarily the way you want, you can always go back in. And the good thing about watercolors is you can actually dilute them and you can go back in and you can remove mistakes sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes mistakes are quite tricky to fix, but 9 times out of 10, I can generally get in there and do something with it. And I'm trying to do that here. So there's a lot of white on this bird, and adding textures and sometimes trying to get these little wispy bits is quite tricky. I'm trying to use a combination of both the paints that I have and try not to splash my paint everywhere. And oops, so there'll be times when I'll be quite bold and I'll add colors, and then I realize later that that probably wasn't a good idea, and then I have to go back in and remove it. I'm going to zoom out a bit just so you can see the whole bit more of the bird. There we go. I like to zoom in too because I've been told that a lot of times people like to see this, the close up of, if I'm doing a lot of work on the face, then it's nice to, whoops. And this is what happens sometimes. Oh, hello, Diametral Games. That's a new name I haven't come across. Thank you for the follow. I do appreciate it, and thank you for joining. It's nice to see new names pop up. I always love to see new names pop up. I really do appreciate when people when they follow and they take the time to say hello. So sometimes, oh, first time chat from viewer, diametral games. Very good work. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the compliment. I do appreciate that. Hello to you. And thank you for stopping in and saying hello for the first time on my stream. I hope you're enjoying it. And I hope you've I don't know, are you a gamer? Are you an artist? I'd love to hear more about you and find out what you do. Drop in a chat with what you're working on, what you're up to. I love to get feedback from people. I like finding out what people are up to. And I've been trying to get this bird to cooperate, and I've added. It's actually, even though I've made a bit of a bold a bold line here, and it's sort of gone a bit. I got a bit carried away in here. There's actually some. I can remove some of that. I can go back in and put some white in there and just work it out and remove some of that color. But there's actually sort of right, even if it's not exactly what I intended, and this happens to me a lot. I will go in and put in put in lines and extra lines and hope that I got it right. Go in and correct it and say, what have I done? Um, and this is the reason I don't put all the lines in immediately all the time. So sometimes you get a bit bogged down with what lines go where and what lines belong where, and it gets quite tricky. So Boca, I'm going to walk my dogs, and after that I have a cultural exchange Zoom meeting I have to attend after that, so I'm going to have to go now. Well, thank you, Boca. Thank you so much for popping in again. and saying hello and having a chat and filling me in on the Philippine Eagle and all the interesting information about it. I didn't get a chance to research. Uh, it's always nice to see you. So enjoy your walk with your doggies and your meeting. And who knows, I will most likely see you again another time. So goodbye, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. See ya. Bye bye. So yes. So diametral games. So what do you do? Do you stream as well? So you're waving. That's good. Are you a gamer streamer? Do you stream art? Or you just popping on to find out what people are doing and just for a bit of a chat? I always like it when people pop in and say hello. I never know where people are from, and it's nice to get a bit of feedback just to, just to find out where people are and what they're up to and what they're doing. And I also like to get links if people are, if they have, their own Facebook and Instagram. I like to check out other artists' Instagram pages and see what other people are up to. That's always fun for me. So, oop, I am trying to work out what I've done here. And as I was saying earlier, when you're tracing something down, sometimes it's really hard to work to work out what's where. And I've got a lot of lines, but I'm hello, Spacehead Fourth. Hello again. Hope I'm doing well. Yes, I am doing good. Thank you. It's always nice to see another face, and well, maybe not see a face, but another name pop up that I recognise. Thank you for coming back and saying hey. That's doing quite. I'm doing quite well actually. I'm enjoying this picture. It's quite a bit of a challenge because it's so unusual a bird. It's a Philippine eagle, and they are. I've been told by Boca, who's now left. She's from the Philippines, and she was saying they eat monkeys. So there you are. They're quite ferocious looking. They're quite ferocious birds, and they're about 3 feet, 3 foot tall, something like that. And yeah, it sort of really threw me sort of finding that out. It's like, wow, that's an interesting piece of information about, normally when I stream, I like to get information about the different things that I'm streaming so that I have some idea, I can provide some information. And she actually went on and she told me, um, found out for me and told me what they do and where they're from. They're from the jungle. They're in the jungle, but they eat macaques and other monkeys, and they also eat other birds and anything they can catch, pretty much. So yeah, they're quite interesting creatures, and that sort of was a bit of very interesting information which I did not know. Um, and it's always interesting to find out things about what I'm painting. So yeah, that's sort of convinced me each time. I am even more convinced. I like birds of prey, but they are fascinating, really fascinating to find out. Diametral games. Stop streaming due to a health problem. I am treating my hypertension and I cannot be nervous. Oh, sorry to hear that. That brought me back to my brushes and my watercolours. And here I am looking for channels where there is a demonstration of traditional art. And I came across this channel and was dazzled by the luminosity of his work. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I yeah, I do enjoy working with watercolours, and sorry to hear that you've got hypertension. That's sad. Hope that you're getting something out of the stream and learning something from it. Well, I hope so anyway. And it's always good to pick up a brush if you can, if you've got a chance to. Doing art is very relaxing for me, and I can't imagine sort of not doing it. So and it really does relax me, and it's nothing better for if you're stressed out to just pick up watercolors and just put some paint down on paper. And watercolors are lovely because they are so interesting to work with. And I got into watercolors because I liked I like the luminosity of the colours. And if you've got, I don't know what sort of watercolours you use, Diametral Games. If you use tubes or pads or other sort of watercolours, watercolour pencils or something, I don't know if you've seen this stream from the beginning, but I have a couple that I use, and the ones that are my favourites, and if you've never tried them, it's really worth checking them out. They're not too expensive, and you can get them on Amazon, or you can get them off the internet. They're the ones I use nearly all the time are these ones here, which are Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus, and they're liquid watercolors, and they come in a bottle with a dropper, and they're already liquids. I mean, you do have to shake them, but what they are is they're pigment based. They're not dyes. They're actually pigment based watercolors, diluted with, I think it's distilled water, and they are so vibrant that one drop goes a very long way to do several pictures, and you can sort of dilute them right down to basically water. So there's practically, looks like there's no color in it, and they will just retain a lot of the luminosity, which is why I absolutely love them. He didn't really stream much. Play, yes, many hours a day. The idea was in the long run maybe to make a game channel, but the truth is that this return to art has been perhaps one of the best things that has happened to me in a long time. Oh, that's nice. It's always very good to hear. And I'm so glad when people, pick up paintbrushes again after a while, or even if they've never done it before, to just start something new. Or yeah, watercolor is just marvelous. And I'm so glad that, it's actually, helping you in returning to art, because it really helps me a lot. And I don't think I'd be able to cope with a lot of the stresses in life if I wasn't doing some sort of painting or watercolor. And I do like watercolor better, but they're the best out of all the things I do. But I do also use pen and ink and other things. So just art in general is just so relaxing that it's nice that you're finding something that works for you and it's actually making you feel better. I'm all for that. I love it when you hear stories like that where people are, where it really helps. I used to be part of an art group. I haven't now because I work, but it was mostly elderly people, and just listening to people who've said they've had busy lives, and things like that, and then they've had a lot of stress, and they've started painting because, well, it's a way to cope with the stresses and a way to relax. And so many people get so much out of, getting back into art. And yeah, it's nice. It's nice to hear. It always makes me happy when I hear that people are, that it helps when they get back into art, and that's nice. So yeah, I'm glad. And I think more people would be less stressed and depressed if they could do something that takes their mind off other things. It's not always easy, I know, but it's really nice that, when there is something out there that you can do and that you enjoy doing. And yeah, I'm glad that's watercolors for you. And some people it's woodworking, and some people it's knitting. And so yeah, I'm all for anything that helps people feel better about themselves. I think it's part of the reason I stream too, because I like providing tips, and I like sharing what I know. And if it helps people to, you know, even think slightly differently about, their artwork or what they've done, or even if it just makes people think, I wonder what it would be like to pick up a paintbrush again, or, I wonder how I can do this technique, or even just whatever it is, I'm really happy to be part of that. So thank you for watching my stream. I really appreciate that. And I hope there's, some interesting things to be gained from watching me ramble on about what I'm doing. If you have any questions or anything, may I ask you something about portraiture? Sure, go right ahead. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer it for you, but feel free to ask. Shoot, as they say. What would you like to know about portraiture? And hopefully I'll be able to answer. I'm still I'll keep an eye out on the screen and see what the question is. I'm fascinated. I like it when people ask questions because it shows they're paying attention, and also because it's engaging. And I like to know that people are interested in what I'm doing. And even as I said, if people want to get into portraiture, it's not as tricky. Well, I suppose it is a little bit tricky, but it depends on what sort of portraiture. Uh, Diametral Game says, I think I'm finally understanding some things about watercolor that were a bit difficult for me. I noticed it the other day when trying to paint on papers that were not specific to watercolor and still achieve good results. It is very satisfying to realize that one has made progress in controlling water. Isn't it though? I find this fascinating with watercolor because, yes, paper makes all the difference. I've seen people use thinner paper, which is just not that great for watercolor. And the horrible thing is that if you don't start off with the right sort of equipment or supplies, whatever you can afford, that is, within reason, um, it is really discouraging if you try it and you haven't got the right thing to begin with. And it can often put people off doing anything because they think, oh well, didn't work, so what's the point? And paper is definitely a big important thing, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to sort of like do. You don't have to get the most expensive papers there are out there, and you don't have to sort of. A lot of people think they have to buy the best papers and they have to spend a lot of money on this particular paper is the one you must have. But to be totally honest, all you just have to understand is how the papers work. And if you've got certain thicknesses, I actually don't use a watercolor paper for this. This one here, excuse my moving the pad, I'm actually using what it is, Araldo de Paolo field pad, an A4. Now it's a thicker paper, so you do need a thicker paper for watercolor, just so it doesn't buckle, because it gets very discouraging if the paper buckles if you use a lot of water. This one's 225 GSM, and it's, as it says, it's suitable for watercolor, pencil, ink, crayon, and I've used this. I like this pad because it is really good for other things as well, and I do use I do a lot of other types of medium. So I do use coloured pencils and I do use other things, and you can control the water. So I think if you're trying to for a wet in wet effect, if you use a lot of water, it's always handy to have. I have some special watercolor card which I got because there were times when I did commissions and using a lot of water, it used to frustrate me to have it buckle. If I'm just doing it for myself, it's fine. But if I'm doing it for other people, I like to make sure that I get the colours, that it doesn't get frustrating because it's hard to work over. It's very hard to work over things, paper that's already started to buckle. And from experience, and this is my experience, it's very hard to, you know, um, where was I going with that? I'm trying to remember what I was trying to remember what I was saying. Um, yeah, stretch. You can get paper, prepare paper beforehand, but it's never works the same. And Space Ed Forth, I'm a complete beginner. I'd like to draw portraits in a loose sketch style with charcoals. Do you have any recommendations, workbooks, or any tips? Charcoal. Okay, so I haven't done charcoal for quite a long while, and it's been quite a while. I went to a art class once where they were using charcoals. There's several different ways of doing it. Um, so there's the technique where you can remove, you'd cover the paper loosely with charcoal, and then you have a rough outline of what you want to draw, and then you can actually, but like a mid range, not too dark and not too light, just like a mid tone. And then you can actually go in with a kneadable eraser. And if you don't know what that is, it looks a bit like blue tack and it's kind of like squishy. And these are brilliant. So if you're working with charcoal, a kneadable eraser is just a must have. It's good for most art things, but with pencils and charcoals, a kneadable eraser, and you can get a little tiny one and then you rip it up and constantly knead it. Perfect for charcoals. And you can, if you've done that, you can actually go in and you can just lift up areas that with highlighted, like you put it in a point, and you can pick up the highlights in your portraits, like in the eyes, and you can slowly start building it up, and then go once you've removed. It's called I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's a removal method. It's actually quite effective. So yeah, the idea is you do a rough sketch in pencil or whatever you do. Then you do a very loose, like a charcoal, very loose, broad charcoal sweep across the top, and then without trying to smudge it, which is the hardest bit, is you then, yeah, use an kneadable eraser to just start picking up areas and creating like 3D by removing more in one area, maybe make it down to the white of the paper for the really sharp highlights. Um, and then when you've kind of got loosely what you want, you can then go over the darker areas with, like a darker charcoal. Another loose, sketchy style with charcoals. There's a few really good charcoals out there. It depends what sort of effect you're going for. So you can get the charcoal sticks that are cheap enough, and they're just good for sketching in general. And the charcoal, like I said, I don't do a lot of charcoal because I find it very messy, and because I suffer a bit from like hay fever and sinus problems. If I work with too much dusty stuff, it affects my sinuses. But I've also you can get charcoal. I do actually have some charcoal. They're more graphite charcoal pencils. So you can get charcoal pencils, and you can just do loose, sketchy kind of sketching with that. That's another technique. Depending on, what sort of a loose, when you say loose sketch style with charcoals, depending on how loose and sketchy you want it, and how detailed, what sort of lines you want on it, depends on the kind of charcoals. But there's so many out there. It's worth doing checking on even Google or YouTube or something, to find out. I don't actually have any ideas for workbooks, or that's pretty much all the tips I have in terms of how to do it. But you can get, charcoal pencils are good because you have a bit more control and you can sharpen them, and then you can get quite a sketchy, like almost like a colouring in sort of effect. You can, with the charcoal pencils, you can sharpen them, and you get different densities. So you get, your soft, your medium, and your hard. And with the soft, you can do a lot of smudging with your fingers and things like that, which is very effective. And with your soft ones, if you get the charcoal sticks, which you can sometimes get, you can just do broad, flat strokes and then work over it. There's any number of things that you can do with drawing portraits in a loose sketch style. I do like I do like my charcoal pencils because I'm a bit more detailed. I do sketches, but not terribly loosely. But I do also like the standard charcoal sticks that you get, just the willow bark ones. The willow ones that you can get from the newsagent, you can get from any art supply shop. My suggestion would be to just get don't spend too much money to begin with, is to just go to your local newsagent or art supply store and just see what they have, and start out by spending as little as possible, because you don't want to be spending a lot of money on really expensive things if you find out that it's not for you, or you don't really like it, or you just can't wrap your head around it, or you just don't enjoy it. So my recommendation would be, like with any sort of art supplies. Any last tip on anatomy? I don't want to keep you from drawing any longer, but thanks for all the input. No, I don't mind actually. I actually enjoy giving information about things I know. Last tip on anatomy, um, structure. That would be my tip for that. Find out if you can get a very basic book on. If you're talking about people portraits, you definitely would benefit from. getting books on how to structure, how to do the facial structure. Start off with the basics. So, how to construct it using, what your proportions are, and ratios. That's very important. So, the ratio between the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, generally, as a rule, I would say, and most artists will cover this, generally with portraits. If you're going to construct a portrait from scratch, you draw the, head and chin. You still work out the height that you want. It's pretty much divide it in half, and that's actually your eye line. You wouldn't think it, but your eyes are actually about halfway down. And when you see pictures, a lot of people do the eyes too high up. But if you draw a oval, or a rectangle, and then create it. But there'll be books about that. You draw an oval, divide it in half exactly. Then from that half down to the bottom, divide it in half again, and the top line will be basically where your eyes sit, eyebrows, and so. And the middle line would be kind of where your nose is, and then you divide it in half again. This is a very rough. I mean, it varies, but divide it in half again, and that's where the mouth sits, and then a little bit under for the chin. So, and there's lots of tutorials about, basically how things are, how features are structured. But it's always good to do a lot of research about, proportions. Proportions are very important, and distance between the eyes. So, a basic tip: the width of your eye is the space between the two eyes is actually the width of one eye. So, where you have your eye is sort of like this wide, then you can generally go from the corner of the eye to the edge. There is where your so I'll take my glasses off, but basically this bit, and then it's almost the same. So the width of your eye, and then from the corner to the corner is pretty much the width of your eye, and then you've got the width of your eye, and then you've got sort of a width of your eye again, and then that's where your ears start. So it sounds a bit weird, but hello, Miss. Oh, hello, Sniffy Night. Don't mind me. I'll put this stream on the background while I work. Thank you for dropping in and saying hey. It's always good to see people come back again. I do appreciate that. So it's nice to be there in the background while people work. So yeah, I was just saying the Space Ed for some tips there for portraits. So that's generally, I've just picked this up over the years, but as a rule of thumb, um, okay, noted, and we'll keep researching. Thank you very much. I hope that's helped at all. I wish there was more I could sort of cover briefly. Sort of, but that's roughly. There's a lot of libraries will also have very good books on. Well, if you don't want to go to a library, then you know you can find nearly everything on the internet about how to construct features and things like that. There's a lot of very good tutorials, and I hope that helps anyway. And I hope you find what you're looking for anyway. So, excuse me for taking a sip. My throat gets a bit dry. Yeah, there's so many artists out there that are very good, and I'm more than happy to share. But hopefully I hope that's kind of helped a little bit, and that I haven't led you in the sort of astray and down the wrong path. But it's that's what I've picked up over the years anyway, doing portraits, and I'm still always learning. But as a rule of thumb, it's generally those what I've stated is pretty much accurate. I mean, not everybody will necessarily agree with me, but as a rule of thumb, from what I've noted, that's pretty much it. That's how you can, construct a face, anatomy, and then it gets really complicated. But it's good to start from the basics and then work your way from there. So you start with the basic, structure of the face, and then go from there. And yeah, that's pretty much it, and that's all I do. And I'm still always learning new things, and happy to pass on anything that I've learnt too. Okay, noted, and we'll keep researching. So good luck with your research, and I hope you find exactly what you're looking for. And I'm going to zoom in on my eagle a little bit more, my reference that is, not my actual picture here. It's got this lovely sort of very weird hairs, and I'm trying to get this trying to capture the brown feathers. It's sort of a fierce looking glaring eagle. I'm trying to get that effect, and I haven't done any of the very strong details around the eyes yet, and they will. I like to leave the eyes almost till last, and I've said this before because that way I can see where I'm going. I'm zooming out a bit, so I'll just see how I'm going and where I might need to add the darker colours. And it's tricky because I'm not always, there's always so many variations on these pictures that I do have a very good reference, and sometimes it's very hard to follow the reference. I'm trying not to do it exactly, but I'm trying to get the idea of where the feathers sit and how it sits on the forehead. They have these lovely, they have this really white, I'm trying to keep it white, this white bit in here, and then they have this very dark brown, well, white plumes, but they do have a very strong line which goes up the middle of each feather. So I try to put it, that's probably a bit too bold, but the idea is that I'm trying to put the lines in, the ones down the feathers, and still retain the details. It looks a bit funny because they're jutting up all over the place, and I do like a good eagle. Um, he looks a bit comical, and I'm trying not to, I'm trying to take him very seriously, and he looks very serious, quite focused. And I'm trying to get this level of focus, trying to capture it. It's very difficult. The the kind of colors that are in the plumage, and it's hard not to get bogged down in working out where the actual lines sit. Because they're very wispy eyebrow, I call it eyebrow hairs because they kind of do look a bit like eyebrow hairs, and they are most odd. So brown there and yellow and oranges in places, and a very strange looking bird. I'm having fun, and that's the main thing. And I'm trying to capture some of the lines. So there is, everywhere I've drawn a line in pencil is actually a line on the brown part, and they are weird, like tricky to add the colors. And I'm making it up as I go along, and I'm never sure how, how it'll turn out. So I'm using a combination of two different types of paint. So I have my Kuretake Ganzai Tambi, which are my gouache, and that's a very nice paint. And it is thick and creamy and very nice to use. It's just a delight to use. I have so much fun when I found this paint, and I had to try it, and I found it on the internet. So if you ever want to try a really interesting watercolor paint, which isn't too expensive but is so much fun to use, these ones are just lovely. They are called Kuretake Ganzai Tambi. They come in 12, a pack of 12 and things, and other sizes, but I've actually bought the um, a sort of a pack of 36 because that's pretty much got all the colors I need in it. And they are like, I've never experienced it before, but these are the paints, and I've done this before, but I'm going to show them again. They are so rich and creamy, and you mix them, they're slightly shiny, so they do have a slight gloss to them. And when you use them, you do get kind of like a jelly like, not jelly like, but shiny effect, which is quite lovely. And they have gold and silver and a pearl colors at the end here, and all these really nice creamy colors. And the only disadvantage is it doesn't have a mixing palette with it. They just come in this cardboard box. The They're in a a nice green cover, which is quite lovely. They have a color guide on the inside, so you can paint your own. You just paint each of the colors onto the lid, and that way you always have a guide handy for which colors are what. Because in the packet they don't look like that. The colors don't look anything like that. So some of them do, but some of them really don't. And another good thing about them is that they come out. So you can arrange the colors in whatever way you want. I left them the way they are, but the pans are like that. So they're slightly bigger than your normal watercolor pans, and there's quite a bit in them, and they last for quite a long time. And you can get the bigger paintbrushes in to them, and it's really nice to use. They've also got the number, corresponding number, and that on the back, but the number is on the lid as well. So this colours, cadmium yellow, and the standard colours, um, and you can just take them out and you can just use a paintbrush and you can put them back, and they're really lovely. So if you ever get a chance to and want to play with them, they you can get them on the internet. They're reasonably priced. They're not one of the more expensive paints out there. There's a lot of very expensive watercolors, and these are not really one of them. And as far as these small fellows, these little ones that I use all the time go, they come in two sizes. So you can get the smaller 1 ounce bottles and 2 ounce bottles, which are the next size up. They're the only two sizes they come in. And you can buy them individually or you can get them in sets. The sets work out, well, pretty much the same, but if you can't afford to get too many, then probably just get a few colours that you need, because they're about $10, 10 Australian dollars for the smaller ones, and about 15 Australian dollars for the larger ones. So they're reasonably priced, and they're consistent. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter which size, which color you get. It will always be. It will sort of always be the same price. So with normal watercolors, where you certain colors in tubes are actually quite pricey, and watercolor can be quite an expensive hobby. Hobby, I say hobby, very expensive to get into if you're not careful. And I think a lot of beginners, and I was sort of one of them, except that I not quite so much, because I went to TAFE and we learnt about colors and all that. You don't have to buy the most expensive paints straight away. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that. They think if they start something like watercolor, they have to get the most expensive ones. You must get this paper, and you have to, buy these paints, and you've got to buy these tubes and this brand. And it's very easy to spend a lot of money. And this is the same with any sort of activity, any sort of art. It's very easy to get caught up buying the best that you can get, thinking, oh, I really have to have that, and I really got to get this paint, and I've got to get this brand. And before you know it, you can end up spending just so much money, and it's not necessary. Like, all you really need is, if you're just starting out and you're not doing it for commission or whatever, you can do one of two things. You can always do a lot of research. I always recommend that you research, and you do get bogged down a bit. You can get bogged down a bit with all the information that's on the net about what you should and shouldn't get, and that can be a bit daunting sometimes. But my recommendation is, if you're just starting out and you're not sure whether it's something you want to do, but you like the idea of it, then just start off with something that is um, not the cheapest that you can buy, because you will be disappointed if it doesn't work. And it's very hard to produce good results if you have really cheap equipment. But on the other hand, there are some reasonably priced uh, watercolors out there which you can get from the newsagent or your local art supply store. You don't have to spend a lot of money. And if you're just starting out, you don't have to buy everything there is either, not every color there is. You can mix a lot of colors yourself. A lot of it can be um, mixed just from your basic colors, your three basic colors. And it really does help to just get sort of the best that you can afford. So just your basic, do some research, but your basic watercolor paper, you don't have to get an expensive one, and just try it out, mess about. You don't have to produce a perfect piece of artwork to begin with, but it's good to start off with something, start off small, and if you find it's something you really enjoy, then by all means, just get the more expensive things if you can afford it, and it's something you really like, and you're doing it on a more professional basis. Then yeah, have a look what's out there. But I'm a firm believer in not necessarily buying the most expensive gear. So a lot of people these days, they can't, a lot of people can't afford it, and it's not necessary. You can produce really good artwork from things that are not as expensive. It's not necessarily the best you can get, but you can still produce very good artwork. I'm still using a lot of paints from that I bought starting out, and they are not student quality, they are artist quality paints. It helps to get the artist quality. But if you're just messing about and you don't know if you're going to enjoy it or not, then by all means get the student quality paints. Some of them are quite good, and it really does help. And then once you discover that's what you enjoy, then yeah, spend the money, do whatever. Just yeah, I'm very firm believer in just get what you can afford, because not everybody has the means, but everybody has the right to be able to paint if that's what they want to do. And I like the idea of people just picking up a paintbrush and just trying it, giving it a go, watch some tutorials, get some tips off people. Just generally just have fun with it, because that's what watercolor is. Playing with watercolor or messing about as I'm doing is, I still always learn new things about watercolor, and I thoroughly enjoy it. It's so much fun to see how things turn out. And as I've said before, I never know from one day to the next, one moment to the next, pretty much how my stream, what I'm doing, is going to turn out. So I have a basic idea, a rough idea, but I don't always know um, how it's going to end up. So I will play around with it and add things. Might not always be accurate, and it gets a bit lost sometimes. It's just what I'm doing at the moment, trying to work out what I'm doing. But I do enjoy it, and I would be painting anyway, because I love painting and I love watercolor and I love art, which is why I do it. And it's something I really enjoy. So if it's something you think you'd like, that you'd really enjoy, or you like the look of it, then yeah, give it a go. Just sort of find out, if you think it's something you'd like to do, buy cheap stuff, mess about, do some tutorials, have fun, play, and just enjoy yourself. And also just do it for yourself. It doesn't really matter if you don't have to produce a masterpiece, and it doesn't matter if the finished piece isn't sort of super duper brilliant. And everybody's got to start somewhere, and it's fun to do. It's fun just relaxing. Pick up a paintbrush, splash some paint around. Watercolor's pretty good because it doesn't require a lot of space, and it doesn't require a lot of equipment. And as long as you have, paper that's reasonably thick, you can play and just practice some blobs, put some blobs on the paper and see what watercolor can do. Just mess about with it. I like to see what happens when you do different techniques. You know, if you drop a bit of the bit of watercolor, pure watercolor onto a wet page, what happens? And some people will actually make notes. So if they find something they like that they notice that it does, that watercolor does, keep a notebook and jot down anything. I haven't done that for a long time, but I used to. I used to keep a notebook and make a note of if I get the results I like, or I mix certain colors together and I think that looks rather nice, I will make a note of it so that I can go back to that next time if I want to, sort of. I'm adding some oranges here because the bird is actually quite vibrant and I'm having some troubles capturing. Generally, I don't add. No, that's actually not true. I do add a lot of colours. I tend to add a lot of bright colours to my pictures. And the beauty of watercolour is you can get quite vibrant and you can knock it back if you don't like that it's being too bright. And I play with watercolours a lot. And as I've said in my stream, if I find that there's something that's not just working for me, or not working at that precise moment, I'll go back in and play with it until I get it looking the way I want it to. And I'm combining the two paints, the gouache, which is the kuretake in the pans, with my liquid watercolors in the in the bottles. And I will sometimes actually go over and work out what I've done and how I've why it's not looking right. Because sometimes even when I'm working on something, I will step back and say, "Oh, this isn't quite working correctly." So go back in and assess, and then darken up some areas, add some lines, and I may go back in. There's a lot of feathers in here at the top here, which are getting a little bit lost. And I can't really put paint on them because if I put paint on them, I'm painting the whole thing, and I'm trying to avoid doing that because they are white feathers. So what I will do is get some pen and ink later, and I go back into it and work on them. And it never hurts to do some extra work, go back in. It's never too late. Like you can do that at any time. Now this lovely bird, and I'm trying to get the right color, has this. I've done it a little bit. I always have a piece of paper to test the color on. Has this really nice yellow, and you can go back in, and I do this a lot. Is I will just get a color like this yellow here, and I'll end up putting it back in because there's a lot of these birds are quite interesting. They have this yellow plumage under here, and I'll put the base color in first, and then if I think it needs anything else, I will generally then just get my paints and go back over it. In here, there's not a lot of, I haven't done a lot of feathers in here. I've done a lot of the shadow and the shading, and as I said before, I like to use the bigger round brushes because I can use the tip of the brush to add the detail, and the actual brush itself holds a lot of water, and I can go broad strokes or I can go in and thin it out and I like to add like the fine details, little flecky details later. If I think that it needs it, like I'll think that this I might need a little bit more of this color, or if that color doesn't work, then I'll pick a different color and go back over it. I like to tie in the tones that I use. So if I use a yellow in the plumage, I like to use some of that yellow elsewhere. And sometimes I will, unless it's not in there, and then I won't because then it will look a bit strange. But I also like to add lines afterwards. And if I find that that's not quite the color I want, I'll blend and I'll add some more. See, I'm adding some color in here because the bird itself has these feathers and they're quite spiky and they do have this lovely plumage. And I'm trying to get this um, yellow in here. So you can never really do it wrong. I mean, if it doesn't quite turn out the way I want to, then I'm not gonna get too upset about it. And sometimes the colours aren't quite accurate, and that's okay too. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day how you do it. If they're not quite as yellow, nobody's going to pull you up on it and go, oh, this bird isn't quite the right colours. You've done it the wrong shade. And unless you're doing an exact picture for, not a botanical, a wildlife magazine, and you have to get the colours accurate, it honestly doesn't matter. So if you're painting something and you want to make it a particular color, and I think I've said this on previous streams, if you want you're drawing a picture of a chicken and you want your chicken to be green, then paint your chicken green. If you want it blue, paint your chicken blue. It doesn't matter. That's half the fun of doing art. You can make something look however you like, and a lot of people will like it just because it is unique and it's different. And that's where all the fun is for me in the painting, is where you can go out of the comfort zone and make it sort of slightly, do something different with it. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And I like to add extra colors to lift it up. So, I will keep going with this. And it's slightly different to every picture I do seems to turn out differently and not always intentionally. Sometimes, I don't know why, but sometimes they kind of take on a life of their own when I'm painting it. So I will start with an idea of how I want to do something. And then as I'm painting, I find that it turns into something else. It's just very strange, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing. So there is a bit of blue. So I'll find colours where you wouldn't normally have the colours necessarily, and I'll work over them because I think that's a nice colour in here. And these birds have this lovely um, blue beaks, exactly as I've done it. The beaks are pretty true to colour. They are very nice, kind of a bluey purple colour. And in here, I've tried to capture it, but some of the detail, the pores on um, the beak, I'll put in later, and the nostrils and things that are dark, I will put in also. And sometimes some of the colours just work, and I'll try and tie it in and go, there's an actual shade under here. Sometimes I'll use blues, sometimes I'll use brown, sometimes I'll use a combination. A good tip if you're ever wanting to do something a bit darker in a brown, and you don't just want to use a brown, is if you mix my favourite combination of colours, ultramarine blue and a burnt sienna, and you can sometimes get this lovely dark bluey brown colour, which is really nice for shadows and to add a bit of depth. And it gets this sort of it's sort of like a bluey brown and adds detail, adds depth and tone and shadow. So it's not just, I like mixing different colours together because you can get lots of pre-mixed colours in watercolour. And I think part of the trap is to buy these colours which are already mixed for you. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that you forget how to mix colours yourself, and two, you may also end up with a colour that paintings tend to look a bit flat. So where you have, say, you mix a green with a lovely shade of blue and a yellow, and you always end up with this very interesting shades of green, and you might not necessarily end up with the same shade more than once. But that's what gives it an actual really interesting it's a really interesting effect. So where you're painting trees, for example, you could paint, um, you could have your um, green, and if you mix it with your, if you mix your greens using the blue and the yellows, different blues, different yellows, you'll end up with this lovely different tones of green. But there'll be variations in the tone, so you'll end up with this really nice um, really nice sort of bluishy shades in it, and it'll never be the same. And you'll end up with it might be a really nice sort of more yellowish or things like that. And that's actually makes it look very nice and gives it more of a realistic, feel to it. If you do like a wishy-washy sort of um, wishy-washy sort of thing with where you've got um, blues and greens and different shades and their shadows and things. And it's really nice to have different shades of different colors happening instead of just going for a pre-mixed green. So if you get a pre-mixed green and you compare paintings done with a pre-mixed green, everything will look flat. It'll look so much flatter. And it's fine if you're trying to get consistent sort of, I suppose you could say a consistent sort of color if you want it flat. If you want a flat, you don't want variations in tone, then by all means, you can use your pre-mixed. But a lot of times, pre-mixed colors are a lot more expensive because they've mixed colors. So if you want to save yourself a bit of money and you just want to try out, it's good to learn a bit of color mixing. And it's also good to just do something, a little bit different. Um, Try something a bit different. See the difference. See what happens. That's always good. I'm adding a bit of the blue shading under the chin of the eagle here because what happens otherwise is that it doesn't look like the eagle's head's coming forward and sitting on his chest. And if I don't put the different tone underneath the chin, it gives it that flat. And I like to bring it forward and make it look more three-dimensional. So what I will often do is I'll go over it with different colors in here. So I'll put a blue to make the brown darker. I will often as not go over it with blue, strangely enough, and I'll mix it on the page as I'm painting. So and I never know what I'm gonna end up with, but it does create a bit more of an interest. So I'm going to just make this a bit darker, and so I'm going to keep painting because officially, officially the stream finished at 5, but I'm happy to just keep painting till um, I get either too hungry or till everybody leaves. Um, or until I finish my bird, which isn't going to happen for a little while. So as long as everybody's happy to stick around and hear me ramble, then I'm happy to stick around and ramble. So I'm having a. I always have this challenge with trying not to overwork it, but I am trying to bring some of that blue in. So it's quite tricky, and I might have to bring in some black. I always try to avoid adding black where I can because black, you generally is not a natural color in nature, and I like to create the interest without necessarily adding black. But sometimes in this particular case, I'm trying to get the idea of the bigger feathers wrapping around his wing, and this is the wing feathers here tucked along behind, and I do like to add a bit of depth. Now, what I will do is, I don't know if I'll get time today. What I'm trying to do, the chest is almost the way I want it, is to try and get this some details in the eye. So I might just zoom in excuse me, zooming in. I want to work on the eye, and I'm hoping I can get that. I'll just see if I can focus that by tapping on the screen. If it lets me, let's have a, oops, excuse me a minute. No, I'm not going to be able to get it any sharper in focus than that. It's pretty sharp, it's not too bad. I have a very fine paintbrush, and if I can find my black paint, here we are. And sometimes afterwards, what I will do is instead of going in, I will still most likely go in with pen and ink and do the details around the eye. But what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to zoom right in on my reference and see if I can capture some of the, I could probably use Payne's Grey, because one of the colours I do use a lot of is a Payne's Grey, which is a sort of a blue-grey colour. I'll shake it up. And that particular colour is quite good for darker areas without having to actually use black. But I will attempt to use both. So I'll get my, trying not to use too much black. Payne's Grey is a lovely blue-black colour. And I do like to go back in and do a bit of, and try not to get it too watery, and try to make it a bit bolder. The problem is, of course, that being, I have a, well, I'm short-sighted, so what I'm trying to do is I can get in and put these extra details in, but often as not, when I'm working on something, I like to get right in close, and if I'm streaming, you don't want to see the top of my head. So I'm sitting back at a distance, and it's quite difficult to get this sort of a darker, without it making look like eyelashes, which is what I'm trying to avoid. Oops. Get some details in here and make it darker in here. It looks a bit strange, but sometimes I'll go over it with the colours and then see how I go. So there's a very dark shape around here, and I have to be very cautious not to. It's harder with a paintbrush because the paintbrush is not as fine as my felt tips, my pen and ink. So I'm going to, and as I've said, there's a bit of distortion between what the camera shows, because I've angled my camera here, and there's this camera, and because of the angle it's at, it actually looks like the Eagle is a lot longer and thinner, whereas it's actually um, quite uh, a bit broader this way. But that's fine. Will continue on trying to add my color and get some detail in here, because it's the detail around the eyes that makes a difference when you do the final. And I like to add the detail so that I know where I'm going with it. And it's not always easy to show straight away. You don't want to start with the eye and then not be able to go on from there, because you've just put all your colors in and you've made it just about the eye. And I will put tonal shadows in here in the eye, which I shall probably add in shortly. I'm trying to blend it out so it creates a shadow on the cheek. And if I thin it out enough, I can create a shadow effect on the eye without spoiling it with any luck. I do spend a lot of time when I'm doing portraits on the eye, because I really love doing eyes. That's the main reason I do portraits, because I think the eyes are just amazing. And if you get the eyes right, the whole portrait suddenly just jumps, pops. So you can see already, just from adding that bit of tonal variation, a bit of shade, how the eye looks a lot more interesting. And sometimes I will add, I don't know if this blue is the right, it'll do. I'm looking for a particular blue. It's hard to mix colours and necessarily always the colour you want, and sometimes you can't quite get it. I'm looking for a particular shade of blue, and so for now, hope that I'm not boring you all with the detail I'm putting in. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to keep it interesting. It's actually very difficult when you get into the nitty gritties, which is why I will often not stream the details that I put in, because not everyone has the patience to sit and watch me do tiny little areas, and that's fine. And I'm okay with that. So, and I'm hoping that in spite of that, you still find it interesting to see how I do the eyes. And I'm trying to add a bit of blue, bring some blue back in. These eagles have these beautiful, oh, just lovely coloured eyes. And I'm trying to find the colour. Um, I don't quite have it. To mix the colour and give it a bit of interesting shades. I'll go back in with a highlight of white, which will just really make that pop. And I think that's the key to doing a lot of portraits, is to make sure that you've got enough interest to sort of remember that the eye is in fact a ball. It's an eyeball, and you need to give it that, you do need to give it that roundness. Part of the problem with working on paper, if you're not careful, which I've just discovered, sometimes you just do have to let it dry a bit, because if you don't let it dry and it's still wet, you're in danger of working over an area. That's not too bad. Working over an area, and you can scrub the paper so that the paper ends up being ruined. So it's very delicate balance to work out. In this sort of case, you're better off wetting it and then dropping the color in. You can't really see what I'm doing here because it's a bit too detailed, but I've wet the area and I'm dropping the blue in. I'll go in and try and add this. I'm trying to create I'm creating, trying to make it look, what's the word? At the moment, it just looks like it's sitting there, and I need to go in and give it the shadow so that the eye will sit under the lid. That's a bit better. Instead of just being an eyeball, which just sort of is floating in under the brow, which you want to avoid. And often it's not. You have to be quite patient in watercolor. I like to be, I'd like to think I am, but I'm not. I get a bit impatient because I know how I want it to look and I want to work on it. But if you're not careful and you work on it too soon and you don't let it dry, you're in real danger of making a mistake and ending up with something that you really don't want. So sometimes you just have to step back and say, right, I'm going to just leave that alone, go back to the eye later and put in, other details. And what I'm doing at the moment is I'm going back in. And the good thing about these paints is I can go back in and put I'm using at the moment, the watercolor inks, the liquid watercolors, because you can go over the top of them, you can dilute them and then go over the top quite thinly, and it just adds the extra depth. And when you're waiting for something to dry, which is what I'm doing, um, I'm trying to, I go back in and then try and add it looks like I'm going a bit bold here, but as it turns out, there is some shadow in there. I'm trying to get the cheek so I can work the form of the cheek, and then I can add my these fine little lines, which are actually his really wispy feathers around the neck. And so I will continue to add a blue overtone because the blue is very vibrant and it's very pretty. And I haven't done it here. And you can get some nice effects by just constantly working over it. And I've noted that what I've done is I've actually done a lot of the purple in here, but I need to bring some vibrant blue. So I can drop that in like this. So I'm doing very roughly. Not too much water, but not too dilute either. I want that vibrant blue. So I will sort of continuously go in and say, okay, I need to add some more blue here. I need to build up the beak. This isn't blue enough, or this is too blue, or whatever it is, and we'll constantly evaluate. And what's happening here is I need more blue. So you can work around it, but yeah, like I said, you just got to be careful not to work an area until it's sort of ready. And I do a lot of wet and dry, but I get a bit impatient sometimes, and then I find that if I'm not careful, I can really mess it up. So I'll go over areas that I think I haven't done enough blue, or I need to add. See, this is too white. I like to put a thin wash over the top and build it up. So constantly assessing it and stepping back and thinking, all right, well, I need this to be blue. It's not actually white. And there's very few things which are really, really white. So it does help to, I'll just zoom out a bit. It does help to assess and go in the picture which areas are, they'll generally not be the deepest, deepest blacks unless you're looking at the pupil. And there's generally not a very, very bright white unless it's a direct light and it's hitting, it's from in the sunlight, or it's just, like the highlight in an eyeball. In this case, you can't see it because he's got his brow is right over it. So there's no extra light hitting his eyeball. So you won't get that really sharp white highlight, which is in a lot of portraits that I do. I like to try and put in a sharp white highlight because it just makes it look so alive. But you do have to be a bit careful not to do that if it's not there. So I'm going to zoom out of my actual reference picture so I can see what I'm doing. So the trick is to go in and assess and constantly have a look and see what you've done. Create form. Look at the areas and go, that's not an actual white. Snivy night. All right, miss, I have to go for the night. It has been lovely spending time with you. Have a good rest of your stream. Thank you, Snivy night, and thank you for popping in and saying hello and listening to my stream. It's always nice to see you on here, and I'm so glad that you enjoy my stream and that you stuck around for as long as you have. And I hope to see you again. So have a very nice evening or the rest of your day. And yeah, I'll see you next time. So enjoy. So thank you, and I'll catch you later. I'll be finishing off soon anyway because I have to look for something to eat. It's not too bad. It's only 5:30, and I may go till 6, or I'll see how far I get on this eagle. And I do like to go until I'm at a stage where I'm really happy with leaving it. At the moment, I still feel like there's still more for me to do. And I do like to, chat to people about what they can do in the meantime. So, yeah, as I was saying, I will go over it. I get a bit impatient because I like to have things, sort of be exactly how I want them. But as I said, there's, oops, that's a bit blue. There are no actual, like, really complete white areas. And so if I find, no problem, and please never stop being you. Oh, thank you. That's such a kind thing to say, and I do appreciate it. And I will catch you next time. So I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye. So yeah, they oh, such a lovely community here. Everyone's so nice. And I don't like to see a lot of white paper unless I'm painting white. So I try and leave the white paper in where I can, but this bird doesn't have a very white beak, and I'm building up the blues. And the reason I chose this picture was because I absolutely love the color of the beak. And what I have noticed now is that I am finding, and I'm trying to see here, I'll mix a bit of purple. There is actually some purple in the beak, and I didn't notice that before. And maybe I can put it in. Um, yeah, just do an overlay of purple. It has this lovely purpley blue beak, and I'll constantly go over and assess my colours and say, oh, that needs a bit of purple, or that needs a bit of blue, or that's got a little bit of this colour in it. And you never really make much of a mistake if you can work out what you're doing. And because this is a red and I'm going over a blue, and I'm hoping, yeah, that's the sort of thing I was looking for. I'm trying to get I'm adding the red because that will create this lovely purple effect, which is the colour, sort of a mottled. They're very interesting birds, and there's the very dark beaks, and there's quite a bit of purple on there. I just didn't notice. So there's a bit of red in here, and the beak does curve around, so I'll have to add some um, extra areas under here because I haven't quite managed to capture that. The beak does this strange sort of weird, you can't really notice it, but it does this weird curvy thing. Yeah, that's close. And I do like to add colours where there are colours and build it up. And the beak is actually incredibly dark. So I'm looking at this here going, I need to add a very dark colour. And what will probably happen, I'm trying to work out the colour I need. Now, either it's an ultramarine blue, which is quite a blue, which I have added, or I can get a indigo, which is a really nice blue. And I've got that in my kuretake. So I'm going to, let's see, whereabouts is it? This one here. So let's see now. Yep, that's a nice blue. I will always assess. And down here, they might go, oh, that's a bit bold, but it is what I'm after. And this beak is getting a bit lost, and it's actually thicker here than the way I have it. So I have this tendency to make the beaks quite sharp and pointy when they may not actually be as sharp as I've got them. They are raptors, so they do have very sharp beaks, and getting the right sort of shape to the beak is quite challenging because the beaks have these sort of different, they have like people's noses, they've got like lines and little dips and things like that in them. And this bird has really interesting shape to its beak, and I'm trying to get that. It has a strange little, it's like a dark dip here, which I'm trying to keep in. So I'm not doing the beak all just like a one tone. I'm attempting to give it a sort of a 3D effect. And the beak it's got its own unique characteristics. And like everybody's nose is different, this bird is challenging. And to give it more of a realistic effect, I have to actually do these stripes. It does have stripes on its beak, striations, I suppose you'd call it. And okay, I'm a technical artist, so I find that I do get a bit bogged down with details sometimes, and I don't need to, but excuse me for that. I It's hard to get out of that, and I like to have it look. I like to capture the bird as best as I can. So what I will do is try and do the beak so that it does actually have the depth that it needs to. Otherwise, it will there'll be something that's not quite right about it, and it won't sit right with me, and I'll have to correct it. This has got this lovely, really nice dark indigo. So it's looking a bit better in my mind because I'm adding a bit of interest to the beak and giving it a bit of definition where the beak did actually have definition, because it's quite unique. And to give the form, the curve to the beak, I'm adding these different sort of effects where the beak is actually, if you look at a beak of a bird, or if you look at the beak if you find a reference and you find this particular reference, you'll see that a lot of birds don't have smooth beaks because clearly it's like people's teeth. They use them for eating and they use them for cracking open, um, sort of fruits and nuts and things. And in this particular eagle case, for eating monkeys, and yes, they do eat monkeys, they need the big they have the big beaks, and the beaks get scratched and things like that. And you will get scratches on the beak, and if the beak is too smooth and you don't put in any of those interesting characteristics, it will look wrong. It will look like um it'll kind of look like plastic. So I always try and aim for realism wherever I can. Well, I try not to get bogged down, and I do like to add, and I can still dilute this paint, which is lovely. It's probably a little bit too. There we go. I go back in and add these darker colours because there are a lot of really nice colours in this, and I need to get in and get this sort of shading happening so that it actually looks more like it is three-dimensional. It's hard to do when you're painting because you can't always copy a picture exactly, and neither should you. But by the same token, you want the bird to look realistic, how it's meant to. So I'm going to probably spend some time after I finish my stream, just sort of working on the bird and just see what we end up with. But I will be posting it on Instagram. So if you do want to check how the bird looks after I've finished streaming, please feel free to pop on my Instagram and just have a look and tell me what you think. I'm happy to have feedback and see if this has been helpful to you at all. Next week, I will be streaming a Halloween bird, and it will be another eagle, but it'll be quite interesting. So it will be good it'd be great if you could join me and pop in and say hello and see what I'm doing and find out, if you want to find out what I'm doing. Yeah, but my stream next week will be on a Saturday, not a Sunday, because we will be getting ready for Halloween. So I won't be streaming on Sunday, but I will actually stream on Saturday. So I will see you, hopefully, we'll see you all there. And this is probably at a point now where I'm just going to zoom out so you can see my final, how it looks so far. And I'm quite happy with the way it's looking, but it's not finished, but it's close to being finished. So at this point, it's now, what time is it? It's now 5:45, and I've probably been streaming long enough. I do need to find some dinner. It's late here, and it's been nice seeing you all. And I thank you so much to all of you for popping in and watching my stream and watching my feed. And for those of you who are watching later, after I've finished streaming. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to watch my watercolor painting. And yeah, if you wanna check out how this fellow is going to look at the end with all the details, the final picture, then please check out my Instagram. I will post it once I've finished, or my Facebook, and or drop me a line and or a follow, and that would be wonderful. And hopefully next week when I stream on a Saturday, you'll be able to join me, and it'll be 2 o'clock on a Saturday. And yeah, so in the meantime, thank you all for watching, and I will sign off there. So have a wonderful day and evening, whatever time you're watching, and I'll check you all on my stream, and I will see you all next week with any luck. Enjoy your day. Bye.